is Eagle candidate Sean Hurley, ADA transition plan presentation, economic development plan with Dave Ross. Board discussion will be motion to accept the donation, men's club request to relocate plantings, motion to approve a one-day liquor license application, and a motion to approve the municipal aggregation plan, motion to approve application to the Army Corps of Engineers, motion to accept the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Award. Does anyone have any public comments? Mrs. Arnold? Mrs. Arnold? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I hope this is the place to do it. I'm not sure if you allow comment when a guest is presenting, and I'm referring to 4.4.3, the future of the Racine building. So what I'd like to say is I have an interest in this in two ways. The first is I believe you're going to be asked to approve a sale of the building, which would require an RFP. And I would like to request respectfully that you defer your decision and do not make it tonight. There's a couple of things that need to be addressed. And one is the Carl Paulson stained glass window. In the 2014 Upton directory, there's several copies around. It refers, I think it's page 3 of 4. It refers to an agreement between the Methodist Church and the town when the town purchased the property from them, that window would remain in the building. So in my opinion, the only way to make that happen is in the RFP that it states that the future owner has to retain it in the building. Another way to do it is that it could become the property of the town, and it would, if they rebuild, they would be required to put, if they tear down the building and rebuild, they'd be required to put the building back. There is a precedent for that. The town owns the church. The town clock is in the steeple at United Parish Church. So that's a great concern. I think there needs to be research on that, whether it was a verbal agreement with the town, perhaps town meeting records would reveal that, or whether it's actually something in some sort of a conservation restriction clause type thing. And I don't know that. I think I'd like to do some research, and I think others need to do that as well. What I've heard,
take that up under discussion on the 4.4.
So would you like me to make my remarks?
There are a few options besides selling the building.
Okay, would you like me to save my comments for that point?
That would be perfect.
Okay, I'd be glad to. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments? Seeing none, has everybody had a chance to read the meeting minutes of June 15th, the 28th, July 13th, August 3rd, and August 10th? Brett? Steve?
Yes, I have read them and am ready to approve them from my perspective.
Steve?
Yes, I've read them as well. They're fine. The 10th, I wasn't present, so I will abstain from voting on the 10th. So I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from June 15th, June 28th, and July 13th, and August 3rd. Stephen Maselli and I.
Second motion, Brett Simus, aye. And then we'll do the 10th separately.
Yes, unanimous action.
And then I make a motion.
10th.
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of August 10th. Brett Simus, aye.
Maureen Dwinell, second. Aye. All those unanimous majority action, I'm sorry. We have a guest tonight, the Eagle candidate, Sean Hurley. Is he on the meeting?
Yes, I am.
Hi. Also, if I may speak, I'm supervising the project for the Land Stewardship Committee. So I just want to make a brief introduction that we have approved this project, and it has also gone through a request for determination of applicability through the Conservation Commission. So he's good to go. Just wants to present it to the board, the select board, and see if there are any comments or suggestions. And Sean, please tell us a little bit more about it.
Alrighty, thank you very much for having me on this meeting tonight. So, a brief overview of the entire project. There are 3 kiosks that will be put at the beginning of hiking trails in Upton, and a 4th one that will be completed in the community garden across the road from Steffen's farm. 2 of the kiosks will be placed on Warren Street, and 1 of them will be placed on Fowler Street. I've been working with an assistant scoutmaster in my troop, Troop 132, and his name is Mr. Ray. He is a full-time woodworker, and he has been helping me to construct the kiosks over the past 2 months. And as Ms. Salza just mentioned, I've also been working with the Upton Land Stewardship community to help this project come together. So, a brief overview of the construction of the kiosks that has taken place. Mr. Ray and I went out and took measurements of the kiosks, and this is a printout. Sorry if it's kind of difficult to see in the lighting I'm in, but that is just a printout of the measurements that were taken. And using those measurements, we created a list of wood that we needed to collect. And using the wood that we collected, we created a cut list of the wood that we needed to cut to make the kiosks fit together. So then once we did that, we made templates out of wood that was left over from a previous project of his. And we made 2 templates, one for a cross-section of the roof and one for a post. Once we had done that, the next step was to construct the kiosks. We made blueprints for them, which I already showed. And once that was completed, we're at the current stage that we're at now. So looking forward ahead into what we'll be doing in the future, the next step will be to install the first post that will support the kiosk. We have to do 3 of those, 1 at each of the sites. Let that sit, see where it stands, and make sure that everything is okay to proceed to the next step. Once we find out that hopefully everything is going smoothly, we will revisit the sites, put in the second post, and then put the roof section onto the kiosk. That part of the project will be finished by early November at the latest. Well, not unfortunately, but a small hiccup in the project is that I have to demonstrate leadership through directing and helping other scouts in my troop with the project. And that is great. It's a great experience to have. But it also means that I have to find a time where a sufficient number of scouts can help me with the project, which is why the deadline is by November and not next week, because it is becoming a bit difficult to figure out when a lot of people can come together and help with the project. So anyways, once that is installed, there will be a final section that will have to go into 4 of the kiosks. As I mentioned earlier, there's one across the road from Steffen's farm in the community garden area. And all that is missing on that particular kiosk is a centerpiece. You can see it at the bottom of this photograph right here where I'm pointing. And that is just a bulletin board for anything that the town would like to put on it, whether it be a trail map or any advisories or warnings. I'm simply providing the means to put something like that on the kiosk, and I'm not necessarily deciding what will go on there. Anyways, for the Steffen's Farm kiosk, that is the only thing that needs to be completed, and 3 smaller versions of those will go into the 3 remaining kiosks. So that is the brief overview of the entire plan for the project. And does anybody have any questions for me about it?
Brett or Steve?
It sounds great to me, Sean. Great presentation. Clearly, a lot of work has gone into this, and a lot of thought on this project. So, certainly, thank you for all the time, effort, and energy that you have, and will put into completing this project. I'm definitely a big fan, and appreciate all the work you're doing.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd echo those thoughts. It's definitely a worthwhile project. I guess my only question would be, you had held up some wood earlier in your presentation. Is that a distressed wood? Is that the look that you're going to be going for the entire kiosk? Your pictures were in black and white, so it was kind of difficult to see exactly how it would look.
I also will say that this sounds like a great project, and I hope you find the help so that you'll be able to finish and get going forward on it.
Thank you. I'm sorry if I missed anything that anybody said. My internet connection dropped there for a moment.
Okay, any other questions, public?
No, just, Sean, I was just asking you if the wood that you were holding up, is it a distressed look that you're going for with regard to the kiosks?
No, it is all newer looking wood than the ones that I held up. Those were just pieces of wood that were left over from some of Mr. Ray's previous projects.
Okay, great. Great project. Thank you.
Any
Thank
other?
Do we need to motion that?
We do need to approve it, yes, I believe.
Yes. Okay, I would make a motion that we approve the construction of the 3 kiosks as presented by Mr. Sean Hurley to be placed at the locations he described earlier. Stephen Metellian, aye.
Brett Simus, aye.
Unanimous action. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have the ADA transition plan from the CMRPC. That'd be Connor.
That's me, thanks. Yeah, I'm Connor Robichaud. I'm the Regional Projects Coordinator at the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission. In that position, I work to provide communities with a process for creating ADA plans by pairing some of our strengths with the technical expertise of an organization that specializes in ADA plans. To that end, we went through a competitive procurement process and partnered with the Center for Living and Working. Mike Kennedy, you can see, is joining us from the CLW, and James Mays at Consulting Services. Mike and Jim have completed self-evaluation and transition plans, ADA plans, for over 30 towns, and actually worked on Upton's plan for Kiwanis Beach a few years back. In just a moment, Jim will give you some brief background on the report. But I know we had the long version of this presentation this morning with the Disability Commission that was recorded. So we'll do our best to keep this brief so we have time to answer any questions you may have. It is worth noting that the MOD, Mass Office of Disability, has a project grant program related to capital improvements. From our discussion today, it sounds like Bob Carnegie has a plan to move forward on an app with input from department heads, which is fantastic. No surprise there, though. Bob's been a really great project lead. I can't say enough about his efforts. Thank you so much, Bob, Derek, Kelly, Janice, and the whole Disability Commission. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our consultants. Jim, you want to take it away?
Yeah, Bob, did you want to say anything in advance of us starting our presentation?
No, I was, actually I was going to just introduce all of you to our select board. I don't know if you've met these folks before, Connor and his crew, but certainly again, we have Maureen Dwinell is our chair, Brett Simus and Steve Italian are members, and these are the folks that approved our original funding, so we thank them a lot, and I'll turn it back to you, Nancy.
Did folks hear me all right? Yes, okay. Let me start, but this is going to be a very daunting task. We've been told we need to give a 15-minute abbreviated presentation. Our meeting today was an hour and a half. The last one we did was in Southborough, was over 2 hours. So we'll do our best, but we'll keep it. So you're gonna, if you have questions afterwards, the details, you will get the details, but we're gonna keep it really short. So in brief, I'm going to go over some background information, talk about the format of the plan. Mike Kenny will talk about the self-developed piece, and I'll go back and I'll just briefly hit on some of the assessments. So for those who are not familiar, the American with Disabilities Act was signed into law roughly 30 years ago. It is a civil rights law. It is intended so there is equal access to all persons for all public services, regardless of one's physical or mental impairment. There are 5 titles, 2 apply to you. One deals with equal opportunity, The other deals with access to programs and services, and that's what is mandates a self-evaluation and transition plan for communities. Massachusetts also has regulatory standards on accessibility, but it's a building code, 529 CMR. Civil rights on ADA, so there's different allowances. 521 is strictly triggered by construction. I'm not going to go into the details like we did today earlier on that. So on our plan format, we have what we call a front end piece, and it's pretty similar for all the plans we do, but we're going to update it and modify it. And if we need to specialize for a particular community, but we look at that as our really it's a resource guide for the community, and we have information in there, so it's at your fingertips. It's in your plan. It's just something we feel it's necessary to do. We talk in more detail about the ADA. We talk about other federal accessibility regulations in here. We talk about 520 CMR. We talk about the charter property exceptions. Because the Hearst charter property was mentioned earlier at the start of the meeting tonight. We provide a section on EV charging station guidance. There's not regs on it, but there's standards that apply. So we talk about putting in EV charging stations, what you should follow to install those. We have a section on emergency preparedness planning for persons with disabilities. We have a section on ADA service animals versus emotional support animals. That's been a big ticket item in recent years, especially with the airlines.
DNS server is responding. Your computer is trying to use the DNS server that is incorrect.
We have a section on ADA compliant toilets, portable toilets. And as I mentioned this morning, meaning Mike and I have never come across a portable toilet, accessible portable toilet that was ADA compliant. So in the plan itself, we have the front end piece, we have the self-eval piece, and there's 11 areas or so that we cover on that. Mike's going to just hit upon some of the key ones in your case. We have then the transition plan, and the fourth section of the plan itself is the appendices, which will include any sample policies, procedures. We also have some funding source information there as well. So with that brief overview, I'll turn over to Mike on the self-eval.
All righty, thanks, Jim. Can everybody hear me okay there? Okay, good. Yep. I have to ask that because a last go-to meeting I attended, everyone else was able to, be heard except for me. So that was just like my worst nightmare. So that being said, first foremost, I just want to state I'm Mike Kennedy. I work at Center for Living and Working as the ADA accessibility specialist there. On behalf of Center for Living and Working, or CLW, in partnership with Jim Mazik and CMRPC, thank you very much for choosing our agency to provide this service. And again, I want to thank all the different town officials who helped us along the way, whether it was opening buildings for us or making sure that the building was ready for us to go survey. Derek, I just wanted to say hello to you. Good to see you again. And I just want to thank you for your service. While you were away on the National Guard. We learned that when we were there doing some surveys. We were asking, where you were, and that's how I found out. So it's good to be back working with you. So the self-evaluation, I'm just going to hit bullets here. Under Title II of the ADA, a municipality is required to designate a responsible employee as ADA coordinator. Check. Janice Nowicki is the town's ADA coordinator. 2, adopt and distribute a public notice on the municipality's ADA policies and procedures. Check. There is a statement right on Upton's website and the Commission on Disabilities webpage. Number 3, adopt, distribute, and/or post an ADA grievance procedure. Check. There is one, Upton already has one, and it also is located, can be seen at the Commission on Disabilities web page. Number 4, modify, maintain, and update policies, procedures, and practices, including job descriptions and hiring practices as required. Check. Various areas, whether it's reasonable accommodation or for employment or for residents of Upton to benefit from programs and services. There are ways one can do that. That is also available on the Commission on Disabilities webpage. Provide reasonable accommodations to qualified individuals with disabilities. Same as number 4, very similar. Check. Maintain and upkeep accessible features. That we did discuss in more detail earlier today with the Commission on Disability. A lot of punch list items that Jim might be able to talk about, or in his other portion of the presentation. But otherwise, you can just always contact us. And number 7, to provide auxiliary aids and services to ensure effective communications to those with disabilities. Once again, check. There is a procedure to do so, again, on the Commission on Disabilities webpage. So that being said, really, the town of Upton really has a lot of the self-evaluation piece, covered. I would say probably one of the best in the 30 or so ADA plans that Jim and I worked together. So kudos to you guys. I think there was only one suggestion I made with providing auxiliary aids. In the current statement, it says to notify the ADA coordinator no later than 48 hours. I had stated this morning that really should be like 14 days, because some things like requesting a American Sign Languages interpreter would take a lot more time than 48 hours. So that's why the 14 days, and many municipalities have adopted that time frame. So I'm going to stop there, and if people have questions after we finish our presentation, you're more than welcome to ask, and you could always contact us offline, on your own time, because once we leave, we're not gone. We're there to provide technical assistance when you need it. So thank you for this opportunity, and now I'm going to send this back over to Jim.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. So on the transition plan piece, which is the assessment of the different properties, we looked at buildings, facilities, recreation areas, and also sidewalks and curb ramps. The format, which I'm assuming most of you have had a copy of the plan and have looked at least some of it. So each facility has its own individual report. The report in total is 160 some odd pages. So for a particular building facility, we have a general description of what that is. We have a photo. We identify, what the areas of non-compliance are, and we have the detailed, assessment. The detailed assessment would include the description of a specific item. It would include the federal citation, the state citation. It would include the specifics on what would need to be brought into compliance. And then we have identified the priority, whether it's 1 through 4, there's a rationale to that. If it's 1 is access, 2 is goods and services, 3 would be bathrooms, and 4 would be anything else. The feasibility, 1 through 4 rating of who could do it, and then a time frame, immediate, near, or long term. And then we have cost estimate of what it would take to bring that item into compliance. Now, there's a couple things to know, and again, we talked about this at length at the earlier meeting today. There are differences between ADA and 521 CMR, and there are differences even within the standards themselves. So we look at the higher standard of the two, and that's what we put in for the recommendation of compliance. There are also some other discrepancies in terms of what the ranges and that sort of thing. I'm not going to go into detail on that in the report, and we went into that earlier today. So trying, just not bore you with a lot of those details. So in general, on the building side, the types of things that are very common a common theme throughout parking. So non-compliant running slopes, cross slopes. So parking spaces need to be level. Level is 2% or less running or cross slope. In many cases, there are a lack of access aisles, or the parking spaces themselves weren't the right width, or the access aisle not the right width, or there was no van designation as part of that parking area. And also in many cases, the signage was too low or too high. Signage must be a minimum of 60 inches at the bottom of the sign and no more than 96 inches at the top of the sign. Also, it must be no more than 10 feet in front of the parking space. So again, the plan details, but that was a common theme throughout, we saw in the town. In many cases as well, there are abrupt changes in level surface as more than one quarter inch on the accessible route from the parking area into the building. Could be the transition area from the asphalt paving to the concrete walkway, or could be the threshold going into a doorway of a building. You can go up to 1.5 inches if it's beveled at a 1 and 2 slope, but we're basically talking, really abrupt changes with no slope at all. In many of the buildings, we had lack of tactile designation signage, knob-style hardware. In many cases, drinking fountains were not high-low. They were either low or they were just high, or they didn't have proper knee clearance below the drinking fountain. A lot of the stair railings, in many cases, there might have been railing only on one side of a stairway, interior and exterior. And the railings themselves were either might have been too high, might have been too low. They weren't round or oval in shape. There might have been rectangular, just basically, a wooden 2x4. And in many cases, again, they lacked top and bottom extensions. Top 12 inches parallel to the floor, and at the bottom, it's slope distance of one stair tread, and then 12 inches parallel to the ground to the floor. In some of the buildings, some of the service counters were too high. 36 inches is the maximum height for a service counter. There was also, in some cases, reach ranges were exceeded. This was both in bathrooms as well as in other areas. A reach range under ADA is 48 inches. So if you use something higher than that with a light switch or something else, then that's too high. There was also protruding objects in many of the buildings. So protruding objects is anything that goes more than 4 inches from a wall surface at a height of 27 to 80 inches above the next floor. And so if I am site impaired, I'm using the wall surface to kind of guide me along that accessible route. So if it protrudes more than 4 inches, then I am more likely to bump into that, and I could injure myself depending on which level, it's either at head level or lower level. There are also, in many cases, non-compliant accessible routes of travel, either interior, where items placed, reducing the clear width, less than 36. And Mike had mentioned earlier that the maintenance issues. So we found it in a number of areas, sometimes the overgrowth on a sidewalk reduced the accessible route to less than, in some cases, like 20, 28 inches. This was in this case of the accessible route behind, some of the sidewalks, some of the sidewalks you looked at on the main corridors. You also had a number of your we call them kitchenettes, your staff sinks and workspace and your microwaves that were too high and did not provide knee clearance. And again, the bathrooms varied throughout. but typically there were proper clearances from the in front and side of the toilet, a water closet toilet, 18 inches on center from the near wall for an adult, 42 on the far wall, 42 in front. Grab bars 33, 36 inches. We found some too high, too low. We found some dispensers over the grabs. We found dispensers too high. So a bunch of different things. Some are easy fixes. Some might need to be a little more. So those are the general things. And just a quickly bullet. I'm looking at time, so we're getting closer to 15 minutes. Town hall. A couple of key things. The exterior ramp, main entrance. 5% is the max for an accessible route without railings. So if you're more than 5%, up to 8.3%, you need railings. There are sections there where 5.6 to 6.3%. So technically, you would need railings on those areas. The staff bathroom was one of the ones which was too high and no knee clearance. The library, as you know, which I believe you voted to have that place or constructed facility. But as you know, there's no accessible route into the building. It's stairs only. There's no vertical access.
Riding on a shooting star.
And the cable access in the upper levels.
Heading out
the bathrooms were
toward
wholly
green.
non-compliant. Couldn't even no maneuverability. The library checkout counter was too high, and the director's office is not accessible. The police station, and again, there's no vertical access between levels. The holding cells are not accessible. The ramp, there is issues of deterioration excessive on the outside. And there were some other things which were problematic. Fire station overall was in good shape. One of the issues we discussed with the chief, the entrance to the accessible parking is at the back of the building, which is close to the entrance, which accesses the elevator to the public meeting room on the second floor. That's great. There's no directional signage. If you want to go to the main entrance, there's no directional signage directing you to that area. Also, ideally, there should be accessible parking for that front entrance, because that's why you should have your accessible parking the closest to the entrance of a building. So at the main entrance, the parking at the rear is really not the best desirable effort. Up in front of the parking spaces had excessive cross slopes. I mentioned level is 2%. We were talking in the 4 to 7% range. The bathrooms, number areas non-compliance, and the lack of tactile designation signage or appropriate tactile designation signage. DPW, the admin building, there was no permanent signage for parking. The ramp to the building, there was only one railing. The existing railing was non-compliant. It was basically a 2x4, too high, incorrect shape, no extensions top or bottom, and an extensive abrupt level surface at the top, but also into the building. And the stairs themselves are non-compliant. The railings, both in size, shape, height, and lack of extensions. On the Memorial School, we used the pre-K standards for those classrooms that dealt solely with pre-K, and K-3 standards for the common areas used by the students. There are different standards based upon grade level. So again, in many cases, which were solely for students, the items and dispensers totals were too high for reach range for students. Similar for bathrooms, for the particular age group, items were too high, or the setbacks were too far or too close. Grab bars too high. So a lot of things, within the school area. Again, more detailed in the report itself. Recreation for unimproved properties, including cemeteries. Again, really no action is required. It gets more detailed report unless you start to make improvements. So once you start to make improvements, then that's going to trigger bringing some things more into compliance, whether it be parking, accessible routes, or that sort of thing. Town common, there's no accessible route in the interior except for one walkway going across, and except that walkway terminates at 2 8-inch granite, either steps or curbings. So really, that itself is not accessible. I know your scout candidate mentioned Stebbins Farm. Because there is a community garden there, which is a service being provided to the residents of the town. There's no designated accessible parking, and there's no accessible route into the garden area or other amenities. So if I'm in a wheelchair or other mobility, limiting disability, I have difficulty accessing that garden area. Wildwood Park, Heritage Park, very similar situations where there's no acceptable routes to and around facilities there, whether it be a bench or a kiosk. Leland Field, again, no accessible route of travel, around the field itself for the most part, or to the fields and benches. There's a portable toilet there, but it's not an accessible toilet. It's not on an accessible route. Also, chain link gates under the ADA, they're required to have a 10-inch smooth surface at the base on the push side, would presumably, so if you're using a wheelchair to push open, then you're not going to get caught on that. VFW playground, picnic tables lack knee depth, no accessible route to and around, no accessible route between play equipment, wood chips throughout. Wood chips is okay as a fall surface, but not okay as an accessible route of travel. The portable toilet was not ADA compliant. Similar West River Field about parking, accessible route. And again, the portable toilet was not ADA compliant. It was accessible, but not ADA compliant. There are things which were present there, such as dispensers over grabs, not enough clearance from the front of the toilet door, and those sorts of things. Upton Beach facility, in parking, there are a couple issues with signage being too high or not having a van designated space. Same thing with the chain link gates, same thing with picnic tables. On the Ramsey building, knob hardware, no tactile designation signage, change level surface to get into the building itself. On the bathroom side, you had running slopes of up to 8.6% to get into the bathrooms. You need a level surface in front of bathrooms for maneuverability, lack of tactile designated signage, and there's other issues relative to meeting some of the heights and step out requirements within the bathroom area itself. And the same thing with the fields, really no accessible route of travel to and around the fields. The stairs to the softball field or granite curbing, and when you have stairs, they need to be consistent, both with the rise and the run. And with granite, I mean, that's almost impossible to do. And there are no railings for that facility. Memorial School playground, some of the same issues. Wood chips, picnic table would not meeting knee depth. Entrance gates having being chain link, and actually not having access into that playground. And finally, on the sidewalks and curb ramps, we looked at West Main Street, Town Common area, North Main Street, and Milford Street. And in general, lack of detectable warning strips, lack of level landings at the top of the curb ramp. The curb ramp itself on the main slope in excess of 8.3%, on the flared sides, if there were them, in excess of 10%. In many cases, there were obstructions along on the sidewalk. It could be mailboxes, it could be manhole covers, it could be telephone poles. We had the vegetated overgrowth. We have guy wires which were at an angle, which would result in being a protruding object or lack of headroom. So if I'm side parent, I'm going to run into that physically, and so you need a more expected so you have the wire coming down with the support brace on the side. I mentioned we had crosswalks ending in granite curbing, asphalt curbing, or just going into grass. And then I had mentioned that in one case, which there was a business which had a business placard right in the downtown area, right plop middle of the sidewalk, reducing the flare width from 36 inches down to less than 20 inches. So in a real quick nutshell, and I think we're probably a little over 15 minutes, but that's just a quick summary of the plan. It's a lot of detail in the plan itself, so hopefully you'll have the time to take a look at that, and then we can obviously answer the questions for tonight. So that's my part right now.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And we know that the town wants to be compliant with ADA, and it's a large undertaking, and I think they need to put a program together prioritizing different projects and make a commitment that each year that we would put an article forward to borrow money for ADA compliance. I think that would be a good program. As one selectman, that would be my opinion. I don't know, Steve or Brett?
I mean, I would say along those lines, Maureen, yes, it's nice, that the town is moving in the right direction and trying to address these problems. I think some of the problems that we have, obviously we have very harsh winters. When you're talking about grade and steps and, the ability to walk, these things deteriorate rapidly over time. And I would say this about your comment, Maureen, is the state seems to have surplus of tax dollars, and it seems like there's more and more dollars each year that are available through grants. So I think I'd rather see, instead of us paying for that out of our taxpayers' dollars, maybe going after grant money to try to address some, obvious problems that we think we can address, on a reasonable and cost-effective time schedule. So, but again, thank you for the work, and I had a chance to review it, but there's an awful lot of material here, and it seems like you have to read it more than once to really absorb it all. So,
Jim, are there grants available for ADA compliance?
Yeah, that's a Connor question, but I wore the same hat Connor did in my past life. So yes, I mean, there's CDBG, Community Development Block Grant through the Department of Housing and Community Development, which will fund construction projects. It will also fund design projects. There's also the MOD grant, which Bob's already, I think, discussed and looking going after. Also, when you go at some of your also community compacts, I think one of the communities we're working, or it's hoping to work with, Connor, they've used community compact monies to do some things. And also, when you do some of your public works construction, you got to make sure, whether it be complete streets or something else, or even Chapter 90, if you're involving sidewalks, you can also do some of your issues on your sidewalks, your cross slopes at driveways, your curb ramps, and incorporate that into and removing some of those other impediments that are there as obstructions into that project. So there's a multitude, and we do have funding source in the application, in the plan, in one of the appendices. We have a list of potential funding sources, and Connor is your guide if you go ahead and help you with that.
Are these matching grants?
Not. I'm trying to think. So far, the ones I just mentioned, not necessarily. Now, in some cases, the CDBG used to be, if you could leverage monies, it might give you more weight on a project. They've kind of backed off on that to some degree, but as I recall, I don't believe any of those are matching grants. And Connie, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you got it.
Thank you. Brett?
Yeah, so I know a couple of people have questions as well, but it's obviously a tremendous amount of work. There's a lot of information in here, and I think it's really important as a community for us to look in the mirror on things like this, and this document and this research helps us to do that, right, and really bring some clarity to an area that I think often is opaque for people. So thanks for all of that and for sort of bringing the opportunities very clearly and specifically to light. Couple of specific questions, and sort of a more general one. The cost estimates that are included for remediation of these opportunities, some of them are $100, $200, $1,500, $5,000, greater than $50,000, up to $75,000. What are those estimates based on? I'm trying to get a sense, in terms of order of magnitude, what types of things those costs include. Are they just sort of, approximations, or is there any, history or analysis that's involved in creating those numbers?
Good question. So I mentioned my past life, and that's where I'm going to get some of these costs. So past life was, as a planner for 30 some odd years, and the past 32 was with the Regional Planning Agency. I was deputy director and oversaw community development projects. So hundreds of millions of dollars of projects. So I worked with architects and engineers, oversaw many projects. So I still have some pretty current information for what would be cost per square footage for paving or concrete or stone dust, or what it would be for typically, or curb ramps. And also, people have worked, I can call, an architect, okay, what's the going rate on per lineal foot for, ramp railings, if they're, stainless steel. Also in working with other towns and with facilities folks, okay, and they've done some prior, okay, what do you pay for that? Or you just bought an ALS, what was that? Do we give the spec on it? And doing that, you're making the phone calls and also Google research. Go online, you can get many information on what current costs are and factoring into prices for labor on top of that. So it's a whole variety of things. Signage, and to be honest, signage, we've upped our costs on that. And, typically rule of thumb, you could get signage for a lower level, $35, $50, and, found out that we just finished up the plan in Southborough, and the facilities person was costing $125 a sign. It was costing more, if you're just doing a regular sign, just saying, bathroom, or could be stairs, or could be exit. But if you want to go and make it now, library director's office or town administrator's office, room number 12, it costs more. So there's things that, current information, as much as you get it, we factored into our cost. So they're not perfect. And one thing to know in the plan, it's mentioned a couple times, you got to figure, if you're going to put this out to bid as opposed to doing in-house, you got to look at least a 35% increase in cost, contractor overhead profit, insurance, architect and engineering, costs. So if it's a big ticket item, you got to factor another 35% on whatever estimate might be there.
And then what, is there any sense of what the total was? I didn't add up all these costs here. Do we have a ballpark? Is it, $500,000, $2 million? Do we know? I mean, I can go through and do that.
Yeah, we didn't do it. We did it only per building. We didn't do it, or facility. We didn't do it total per se.
Okay. And then is there a measure in Massachusetts that, or is there a way to understand sort of, for lack of a better word, a percent compliant? Because clearly it would be nice to be able to go out and publicize Upton as, the most accessible community in the Commonwealth or something along those lines, just as an aspirational goal and a way for us to really get some energy and enthusiasm around making Upton an accessible community. So is that something that is done? Does the state do any of that sort of analysis or assessment of any type that we could use as a benchmark?
No, but actually, Michelle, earlier at the meeting today, we made some comments similar. So the thing is, there is no percent. And we do a prioritization, and prioritization is the things, okay, can you get into a building? Can you park? Can you get into a building or facility? That's a priority. Next thing, can you get into a good or service? Can you then use the bathroom? And, Michelle made the comment, well, what sense of making a bathroom accessible if you can't get into the building? I mean, there's things like that. So, well, we always like, what are the things that are most used by people that have the most impact on everyday living? And to me, things would be, if you have sidewalks, curb ramps. If you're using a sidewalk but can't get off the sidewalk because there's no curb ramp, that's to me is important. If you can't get into your town hall or your library, your senior center, that's important. Things that are other things under ADA, you can make accommodations or you can relocate programs and services. But I think what the key is, what are the things that really impact people's lives that you can change so you can get access to programs and goods and services? That's, if I was sitting in, Mike sits on a disability, just use a chair in the town of Millbury, and, he has to deal with the same kind of stuff. What do you need to do that's a priority to do the most effectively? Now, do you need to make every single playground fully accessible in your town? Not necessarily. Because if you have 8 or 9 playgrounds, the cost would be tremendous. But if you can make one of your major playgrounds that has all the accessible features, yes, that would be important to do.
I was just trying to get a sense of if there was any sort of benchmarking or relative comparison or performance versus other communities. Thank you for that. And then the final question is around, because there's a lot of things in here, almost like a punch list, right, of things that don't really cost any money. It's just somebody's time and attention. And so I'm wondering, this may be a question for the Disability Commission or Derek or somebody, like, who's responsible for, taking this list and translating it into action? And, do we form committees at each building, or is there some sort of assignment process to say, hey, there's, 30 things on this list that don't cost any money, over the next 6 months, can you address them? Or some approach, methodical approach to try to address some of these opportunities. And I don't know if that's the Disability Commission or somebody else that leads and drives that prioritization and that engagement.
I'm happy to answer that question. And Bob Carnegie, as the chair of the Disability Commission, Bob, jump in if you think I'm off base here. But I think that the Disability Commission, they've been only together for about part of 3 years, and the fact that they've been able to pull together with the support of Board of Selectmen, a ADA transition plan that is now going to be used as a roadmap to create accessibility for all, I think is amazing. And I had said to the Disability Commission in the past that, it would be my expectation that the Disability Commission hold the town accountable in this plan. I know Bob has already met with his committee members, and they already have a plan to submit a grant application to Mass Office on Disability to get us started. But at the same time, Bob laid out his vision with the departments, and he's already asked the department heads to go through their specific section of the plan and start to create that prioritization list so that we can submit that then back to the Disability Commission, and they can use that as a process in order to identify, what is some of the low-hanging fruit immediately, and then what some of the bigger projects will have to advocate at town meeting to try to get those funds if necessary. But Bob, if you have anything else to share, I think that's kind of how I see things moving forward.
Yeah, I would just add that we already have the wheels in motion to submit a grant by October 8th. We expect and are hopeful that we should get between $30,000 and maybe $50,000. But this is only the first time we're applying for it. As each fiscal year goes by, you're possibly going to get more. But at any rate, yeah, we do need to identify just how do we get through the next steps. And it's going to start hopefully with this grant, and then we'll be looking at other grants. But there does, to your point, Brett, need to be some, what are the roles that are going to be played, who's going to play them. There's 5 of us on the Disability Commission. We can't possibly hit that punch list ourselves, but there are a number of projects listed here that require zero money. I agree that we should have somebody that, or a group that just hit that punch list squarely. But then you've got the larger projects that require more input. We're excited about submitting this grant because it's a way to see tangible results from applying this grant. And to Steve's point, Steve Metallion, we look forward to spending state money instead of town money. That's all I have for you.
Well, thank you very much, Bob, and to you and to the whole team for pulling this information together. And it's yeoman's work, and it's an ongoing process. So thanks for everything you've done. That's it for me, Maureen.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other questions, we'll move on to next on the agenda. And thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. I do have a comment, and I think Michelle was asking before I was.
Oh, thank you. This is Michelle Antonelli. First of all, thank you to the Selectmen for supporting this transition plan and the process, and thank you to our vendors who provided it. It's highly detailed, and that's exactly the kind of information we need. I would also caution us, though, to recognize that the town hall was renovated, and at this point, there's a $15,000 or $16,000 estimate on repairs or renovations that have to be made. that are not to code. And this was discussed earlier in the presentation from the vendor. And I think it's important to note that there's the Mass Architectural Access Board guidelines requirements, and then there's the ADA compliance. And sometimes in Massachusetts, generally the standard is higher, but we are required to go to the highest standard. So it's a little bit disconcerting to find ourselves on the hook for these things that have to happen or should happen in town hall, some more major and some more minor. And I would just caution and hope that besides looking at all the things we have to go back and fix in that building, as well as older buildings, that we recognize and really look to the design of any new buildings in town to be held to these same standards, and that both the architects and the builders need to be held responsible for making sure that we're meeting code, and 5 years from now, we don't have this vendor come back and do an update and find out that, oh my goodness, our new building isn't even in compliance. So it's very disconcerting to me, very upsetting. The taxpayers is spending money twice on the same sorts of issues. And we need to make sure that not only do we fix what's broken already, but that we don't continue to create broken things to start with.
Thank you for your concerns, Michelle. And
Madam Chairman, could I comment?
we'll have to look into. Any other questions?
I have a comment, please.
Yes, Ellen.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say thank you to everybody involved. In 1999, I was on the Capital Infrastructure Debt Bond Committee that took a look at this, and we made it one of the top 3 priorities that the town faced at the time. And unfortunately, town meeting voted down the money to be spent. But to say that it was in a lump sum and that it was put in with the other 2 priorities is probably one of the reasons it failed. And I think the point that we need to prioritize and to address it in pieces has a lot more chance of getting through town meeting. But I certainly do hope what happened at that point is town meeting didn't vote the money, it failed, nothing was done. And back then I was a lot younger. I'm a lot more advanced now and expect to be using some of these facilities and would appreciate and hope that this committee and the town move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ellen.
Can I make one final comment, please?
Pardon?
Can I make one final comment?
Yes.
So we suggested to some communities in the past, and some communities actually, when they've been doing work, they've had us look at their plans and just for compliance purposes. Whenever you do, if you're going to do new construction, and if you look, again, I think you might be doing a library or senior center or something, I would highly recommend it, and whoever you are, someone's qualified, someone who deals with ADA, whether it be a CLW or it be IHCD or someone to do it. It might be probably a day's work, quick, write up an ADA audit prior to accepting ownership of the building and prior to having the punch list completed, because a lot of little things get mixed. We mentioned before the meeting this morning that a 2-foot smart level is the only thing that's recognized to determine your slopes. A lot of them can to shoot the grades, and that's not it. That doesn't make it. And a lot of people don't take the detail, take the measurements. And some things are just put in almost like after the fact or at the last second, after it's been inspected. Oh, now we'll put in the dispensers and we'll do this. And then, so if it costs $1,000, $1,500 to do that audit before you accept the building, to me, it's worth it, because you're going to save yourself maybe $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 3 years down the road when someone files a complaint, and now you're on the hook because you accepted ownership of what it was. So that's just just a closing thought.
Excellent comment, and something to be aware of. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah. And excuse me, this is Mike Kennedy. I just wanted to say, I 100% concur with Jim. And I was going to mention that, myself, like I say, before you make the final payment, have people, unaffiliated with, with the contractor do a access audit. I know CLW, or should I say, I have done it in the past. We've had Mass Office on Disability. I also want to state that both Derek and Bob Carnegie are also right with, what are the responsibilities of a Commission on Disability is to see to it that the ADA transition plan is being followed, and that they can be a good resource of what punch list items you want to get addressed. And that's me. I chair Millbury's Commission on Disability, so I definitely know from that aspect. But I will now. I am done. And again, thank you. For using our services. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for your comments. Well taken.
I have one more question, Maureen, if I may. It's to the vendor. You guys, I love this idea. I think it's terrific, and I think it's small money for big return. But beyond the ADA and Mass Architectural Access Guidelines, I know that you folks are well aware that there are things that can and should be observed to help support people with motor and visual and hearing impairments that can be incorporated but aren't required by law. So for instance, the difference between having a chair with two arms for somebody to push up onto their feet versus having a love seat or a couch where they only have access to one arm or perhaps not even an arm at all to push onto their feet. So do you folks do anything like that, looking at the use of the building, particularly since we're looking at having partial senior center as part of this? Do you look and do any recommendations along those lines, or are you strictly about ADA and Mass AADG code?
So we do. So in the report format, you'll notice I mentioned before that we have, the description, we have a photo, then we have a narrative summary. It could be a paragraph, could be 2 pages of areas of noncompliance in the building. And then there's areas that are technically not code, but we found those could be problematic or concern. We'll put that in the narrative. We've done it, and I can't think, maybe Mike, I can't remember specifically, but we have done that, technically, yeah, but, really would recommend you do this, you make whatever this change is.
So, like, with the audit that you're proposing, would you or could you do something along those lines as well? I mean, I would hate to think that we already spent the money on something and then we say, no, we really don't want that chair, we want a different one. But do you have any punch list recommendations as people considering that, so we have it in advance?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm really following you on that. It's kind of
I think
that's hard to do a punch list when you imagine what construction might be.
Okay, thank you. That does answer my question. Thank you.
Okay, if that's it for this evening on the ADA transition plan, we'll move on to the next agenda item, 4.3, the Economic Development Plan, with a presentation by Dave Ross. Dave, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. So I'll let anybody who wants to exit, feel free to exit from the previous topic. So I'm here on behalf of the EDC. We have the majority of our members currently in attendance. We also have Paul, our town planner, economic development coordinator here. I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing, and hopefully I can answer questions or other members can chime in if need be. So as the board may recall, we came before the board very early in the year with our draft of our economic development plan. We had received a grant from the state that we had used to contract with CMRPC to develop an economic development plan. One of the few major plans that the town was missing out on. We have a recreation plan, we have an open space plan, we have the master plan, we have all these other plans, but we didn't have an economic development plan. So we worked with CMRPC mainly through 2019. We came up with a draft of a plan It was structured in 3 sections. The first section is kind of the who we are, what is Upton, what is the history of Upton. The second section, which is the most lengthy piece of the document, is what's referred to as the economic analysis of the document. It talks about the natural resources we have, our infrastructure from roads and mass transit, the fact that we can tie into either the Metro West Regional Transit Authority or the Worcester Regional Transit Authority. Then BTA is in a couple of towns that we touch. It's not directly in our town. It talks about the public utilities that run through town and that we have in town. So either our own sewer and water infrastructure or the gas and electric trunk lines, pipelines that run through town that could be tapped into. And then it talks about the demographics of the town, the residents of town, who the largest employers are in town, and those residents, how much they spend in town and what they spend on. So all that information, it's a lot of tables and data points that have been gathered in there to inform individuals. And then the third section, which we view as the most important section of the document, save the best for last. It's at the end of the document. It actually begins on page 45 or 44, sorry, of the document, is our goals and action plan that we're proposing putting forward. So we've come up with 5 major goals, and under each goal, there's anywhere from 4 to 7 kind of sub-bullet or action plans to take. We came before the board with this draft in February. It was suggested that we do a public hearing or a public comment period, not public hearing, sorry, excuse me, a public comment period, similar that we did on the finance department restructure, that we did with the community center building proposal. So we did one of those. Thank you to Paul, the town planner, who helped put that together and collect that data with Kelly, the town clerk. We received feedback from 4 individuals, 3 as individuals and 1 speaking on behalf of another town committee who had feedback on the plan. I would say that feedback fell into 3 buckets. One was purely opinion comments, and we read those, and that's great that folks have opinion. Then there were ones where it was pointed out like, this map is out of date. We've done a new open space plan. There's an updated map. You should refresh that. This information here maybe was incorrect or didn't make sense or contradicted another table. So we went through and tried to clean up that information and take those suggestions, those edits into place. And then the third section where people had levels of feedback. So we received information or feedback such as there could be more information included around Upton State Forest and the fact that there are some original CCC buildings located in the state forest, which maybe some of us take for granted that those do not exist in their original form in a lot of places around. So that should be something we should include. Maybe some language about the history of the Native American presence in town. So we made some of those updates. And there were also some comments about suggestions on expanding a goal or tweaking them. Some of them we took in and adjusted the plan for. Some other ones we felt didn't necessarily fall under economic development. So as an example, one town resident talked about some type of national historic status being looked at for West Upton. And that's not something the EDC should be following after. That should fall under the Historic Commission, the Historic Society, another group that wants to do that. And I believe, from my understanding from members on the EDC, that has been explored in the past, but it was at the time decided to focus just on Upton Center in our application. So although it's a valid and a good suggestion, it doesn't really fall under the purview of economic development. So we took those suggestions in, but in that case, we didn't put those in. So we come forward to the board tonight having done this public comment period. We've heard from a lot of individuals. We have a plan in place. Like I said, the first section is kind of the history of Upton. It is what it is, right? We can't really go back and change that. The second is a list of tables with data. Now, those tables are constantly changing as new data comes forth. One thing that we would like, if the board will vote in favor of this tonight, is to action or to have the motion say that they approve the plan with the caveat that these population figures be updated for 2020 census data, because the data we have in there is 10 years old. Brand new data has come out since we've last voted on this as a committee. So we can go in and update those tables to the perfectly round 8,000 residents that the census said we had for Upton. Kudos to our town planner managing that to be right on the number. And then the last section are the goals, and that's really like the building block that we're going to use going forward. So our first goal, without getting into all the detail, is focusing on Upton Center. And the reason we picked that as number one is obviously we've been working on that with the vision and so forth for a while now, but we also will be getting the final report from CARP Strategies, who is our LRRP partner, the local rapid response program, I believe, grant that we received from the state. And that was focused on Upton Center. And they're going to deliver us an action plan with 5 different topics that are Upton Center focused. So that's our number one goal. It's number one on the list. It is number one kind of in our priorities, but we are going to work on all these goals simultaneously. So, you know, something's got to be listed first. Number 2 is a focus on West Upton. As we make these changes in Upton Center, what can we potentially bring down to West Upton to help there, whether it's zoning or design standards or looking for grants and whatnot that we can do there. We think a lot of what the LRP program is going to bring into Upton Center can possibly be applied to West Upton. Number 3 is a focus on streamlining municipal processes. Really what we're saying there is when a new business comes into town, and having Paul on board is, you know, helpful, as he's now that contact person for somebody in town. But how do we make it that town hall, town government is business friendly? Not that we weren't business friendly before, but we've heard examples where a business has moved into town and they bought a sign, and then they found out afterwards, oh, you can't put a sign that large in. So we'd like to create processes where we're working with folks right up front. We have a much more robust town website that focuses on that, and that we can develop a local business directory. An example here is there's a lot of information that has come out around relief funds, particularly in the American Rescue Plan, for restaurants. And we said, you know, Paul, it would be great if the town could email all the restaurants in town and let them know this is how you apply for grants and do this. And we found out we didn't have a master list of all the restaurant and food preparatory businesses in town. Like we had to spend, and when I say we, Paul, Kelly, and other folks, chasing down that information so that we could be good partners with some of our tax-paying businesses here in town. So we want to focus on, you know, kind of bringing that group, that information, whatever you want to call it, you know, up to where it should be today in 2021. And not have to rely on somebody going, oh yeah, I think the email or the phone number for this person is that, and did you remember the bean in there, and what about the super? And we were trying to sit around and come up with like a list of all of the places that you could qualify as a restaurant in town. We didn't have just a nice, easy email distribution list. And we do now have that for restaurants, but we don't have it for the trades. We don't have it for manufacturing, whatever the other businesses are in town. And we believe there's well over 200 local businesses here in town, either with a storefront or run out of their homes. Our fourth item on the, our fourth goal section that we have is to focus on fostering the business growth. So we update those programs, but then how can we help them grow? Can we do farmers markets? Can we do some type of listing of all the businesses on the town page? So if you wanted to see, like, where can I buy stuff in Upton? Like, here's a single directory of all that. Work with the Blackstone Valley Chamber of Commerce to host different things in town. Look at vacant buildings in town and how can we work with realtors to help, you know, bring folks in. Bring these small local hyper service businesses into town. And then our last goal, I would say, is a aspirational goal. These are long-term goals, 3 to 5 years, but we shouldn't just be focused on bringing in the next dog groomer to town or the next barber. We have some really unique resources here in this town, from the ecotourism aspects that we can bring in, the history with Millhouse, the town hall, the Bradish House, and then also some of the utility infrastructure we have in town. There are main gas lines that run through town and big electrical lines that run through town. Anybody that's been down Hopkinton Road during that construction, shortly after you pass Pratt Pond, you can see those big lines running through there that service a number of communities. Are there new technologies emerging that we can tap into? So just as an example, we haven't reached out to anybody. We haven't figured it out yet if it makes sense. But there's going to be probably a lot of money going forward, definitely in the infrastructure bill that was passed by the Congress and signed by the president, for electric buses. Well, those buses need to be charged somewhere, and they probably need to be charged somewhere where there's a lot of electricity. So are we able to build out a facility, or I shouldn't say we personally, but attract somebody to build that facility in Upton where they're charging electric buses or they're charging battery storage, because we're right next to those main power grids and they can tap into that, just as an example. And that's something for us to explore. It's something to find out, does the town even want that as a type of business? But that's the type of business where we could potentially bring in tax revenue with a low impact on the residents day to day, right? We know residents don't want a mass recycling plant on 140, and we know residents don't want Target downtown. So can we put a business that's somewhat off to the side of town? It's not right downtown. And those lines run through different places in town, and there's really only activity with the buses leaving in the morning and coming back in the evening. And folks don't necessarily feel like, wow, this is now Route 9 in Westboro or Shrewsbury. But we're able to, drive tax revenue. Can we put in a data center somewhere? Those are very high value buildings, so we pay a lot of personal property tax, or somebody will pay us a lot on personal property tax, but very few employees, so very low impact to town services. So those are some of the more stretch goals we have to try to leverage either our existing cultural resources or some of those public utilities, which don't require big input for us, right? There's not a build it and they will come approach here. These already exist. How do we market that? How do we attract people to come here? And one of the things that we need to do that in order to get like state funding, state grants, is to have this plan in place where we list this as a goal. And then we can bring that forward to different people and say, see, we've identified this. The town has adopted this as a goal. This isn't just us, randomly applying for something. We're moving down the path going forward. So I look to any questions that come from the board, but really what we're here for tonight is to hopefully have the board vote to adopt this as our economic development plan, with that one caveat that, we update numbers for the census as they come out. And then we will continue working forward on the goals that are in here, is kind of setting out the roadmap for the EDC for the next 3 years, moving forward. Nothing is obviously set in stone. If a very unique opportunity pops up, the EDC will work on that. Or if something here we determine is no longer relevant, then, we can choose not to continue forward with it. But this is one of the last major plans that the town of Upton is missing. And this has been in work for probably 2 years now, the better part of 2 years. So it's obviously slowed down by what's happened in the world. But the teams worked really hard to pull it together. So I turn it back over to you, Madam Chair, for any questions or comments from the board.
Steve or Brett?
So we've seen several iterations of this, Dave and others, and I'm just thoroughly impressed with how this has evolved and all the time and energy and effort. It really focused on listening to the feedback that came from the community, that came from the various boards and committees, and I think it's a testament to what can happen when you do that, because it was, a collaborative effort led by, Dave, you and Paul and CMRCP partners and a few other key people, but it clearly took a lot of hands and minds and hours to get it done. And I'm very happy with how this has come out. It's a great plan. I love the way it reads. I love the positioning. I love how the priorities are laid out, and it's just a wonderful piece of work. So thanks for sharing it. And I don't have any specific comments other than, thanks for making all the accommodations, adjustments, and it really looks great. Good job. Thank you.
And yeah, I would say really an interesting read. There's a lot of interesting details in there. Graphs, things that you don't think about as you ride through town. As you mentioned, power grid. There's gas line transmissions in town. Different things that are happening. I just thought that part of it was pretty interesting. I was hoping in the back, when you really get to the kind of that action plan and that focus of what we're going to try to achieve in the plan of attack, I was hoping it would be a little bit more specific, because I almost feel it's really our biggest deficiency in Upton. We're 95.5% or thereabouts, 95% roughly residential, right? We have such a small business and commercial base. I'm a small business owner in town, so, I feel the pain. And I just feel like that's, really one of our biggest deficiencies in Upton is how do we attract business? So I almost feel like, well, we've done something wrong, right? We're all trying. It's been 4 or 5 years. The board's been trying. Derek, you've been on board for 4 years. ETC's been in existence for 3 years. But was there any one thing that CMRPC kind of identified that they look at us and say, hey, this is really, just feel like there's got to be something. There's got to be one major, what are we actually missing? How is it that we are the only small town around that doesn't have any commercial growth? So I guess that would be my question is, was there any one thing that jumped out when you sat down and you strategized with, the CMRPC representatives? What was that one major thing that we're missing?
Yeah, so sadly, I'm very happy. I think we have a good relationship with CMRPC. They were pretty much, data analysis, data producers for this document. They produced a lot of those graphs, a lot of those tables. The action plan at the end was done by the all volunteer citizen committee. There was no input from CMRPC. They pretty much said, here's all your data, and we can gather all this and we can pull all this, and this is a good way to structure your document. But even then, we sat down as a committee and said, we think it should go into these 3 sections. There wasn't as you're looking for, that magic bullet to say, oh, you just need to do this or do that. Maybe that feedback could come from a different partner, but it seemed like CMRPC was not capable, or at least the people assigned to us, into providing that. They did provide us with a table that we ended up excluding based on some feedback we received from a lot of people on what is called retail leakage. And retail leakage aims to determine what type of money your residents spend outside of the town. And the number one thing on the retail leakage report was automobiles. And what we hear from everybody, sorry, Mr. Matillion, is that we have too many automobile shops in town and too many places. And yet that was the number one item that they said in terms of total dollar value that wasn't being spent in town. So that report, in essence, was saying we need even more automobile shops in town. And there were other items on that list that made no sense to us as to what they needed to be. So I think maybe that was their attempt at trying to say, these are the industries you should be trying to attract because there's demand for that. But we struggled to make sense of the numbers. It was hard to comprehend on some of them why, that demand is perceived to exist here. But at no point did they suggest oh, you need to change your zoning, or you need to split your tax rate, or you need to offer more TIFs, or none of that type of language occurred in the process. So I also would say that I agree that the goals are fairly broad, and I think we did that on purpose with intention of allowing some leeway as we gain more information, we gain more experience and knowledge to be able to kind of shift a little within the framework instead of it being very specific as to we need to do X, Y, or Z on that. So, but I appreciate what you're saying, because I too would love to know what that magic answer is, if there was, one to be able to do that.
Right, right. As you get through reading it, you're just hoping for, as you mentioned, that magic bullet. And it's just, unfortunately, that magic bullet point, it's just not there, unfortunately. But in any event, great job. I think if you wouldn't mind sharing that retail leakage graph with the board, that'd be kind of another interesting read. I'm kind of a numbers guy, so anytime I have an opportunity to look at tables and graphs, I'm always game. So if you could share that with us, that'd be great.
Yes, we can definitely do that.
All right. Yeah, it looks good to me. A lot of hard work.
I think you've done a great job, Dave, you and your committee. And I like the goals being broad enough to give us a little leeway. Things change along the line, and there is no easy answer to what will make things work. You just have to work at it. And I think you've done a great job.
I'd like to make a comment. This is Tom Baer. Has anyone done an assessment of the available land for businesses to come in and occupy?
I believe there was, and I'm trying to look through the document as I say this. There is a table on there. But what's tricky is what CMRPC will do when they pull the data for us is simply point out, like, this is the land that's in these different zoning regions. It's hard to know unless it's currently listed in MLS, if land is really available, right? And you can look at a parcel and go, wow, that's a 100-acre parcel tagged on to the railroad or 140, thinking particularly down towards as you go to Hopedale and Milford. But then you find out it's wet, or the terrain is not easily navigated, as people want nice flat lots to be able to build on. So it's a tough question to answer, Tom. It's been looked at, but there isn't these are the lots we want to actively work to market. Now, that is part of our promote business growth, which is goal number 4, is to find ways to partner with local realtors and other folks in town to be able to help them market those lots, or if somebody owns a piece of land in the C&I or general business district, that how can we market that so that it's going towards a commercial, industrial, or general business use and not ending up in front of ZBA so we can build 4 homes on 10 acres of industrial land, and then kind of we lose that. You think about there's a whole section of 140 from the town center going towards Milford that is zoned either general business or C&I that has a bunch of single family resident homes on it. And once that happens, right, we lose those lots in essence in perpetuity. So
yeah,
I don't know. I kind of answered it, kind of skirted around it there, Tom, but that's unfortunately where we are, that it's a great idea. I don't know if there's a easy way to get that information, but action plan 4.1 is an inventory of existing businesses and vacancies in commercial and industrial zones to do that. And then one of our other ones on there is action 4.3 is to promote the use of vacant buildings and at least start there and then move towards land. It's going to be easier to convince a bakery to move into a building that's available than to build and then move in, because that's a whole nother layer of cost, right?
Yeah.
We are lucky in this town that our commercial and general business vacancy rate is very low. The counter argument is that's because we don't have a lot of it, as Selectman Matillion pointed out. But we do not have big sections of the town where it's just empty, vacant storefronts or commercial space.
Thank you. Thank you. I have one other comment to make, really. I noticed on the agenda that the future of the Ristine building was listed there. So I'm just going to make my comment and let it go with that. But my look at that situation is I started at the town hall and I did a walkthrough of the town hall, and I found so many areas of the town hall, particularly on the lower floor, that were overcrowded and just packed with storage and all kinds of material that, my only assessment was that, we filled up the town hall really fast, and that the town ought to be looking forward to the future as to expanding town facilities to have more office space and storage or whatever. And the future of the Ristine building isn't, in a way, I'd hate to see it go. But my primary concern is that I don't think we should lose control of the land, the parcel of the land, and the 6 Main Street parcel. It's right there as the keystone, along with the town hall, as being a centerpiece in the town. And I think the town ought to retain that for future expansion. Whether we put the Ristine building to some use or whatever, or replace it in the future, I really don't think you should lose control of the land. That's all I have to say.
Okay. You're looking for the approval and adoption, correct, Dave?
Yeah, I'd like to do that before we move on to the other items.
Is anyone ready to make a motion?
Just one other quick comment. Was there any other items in here, David, that you needed some latitude on as far as before we adopted it? You had mentioned the population update. Was there anything else in the tables that needed to be updated?
No, that is the only one that's been brought to our attention in the last 6 weeks.
Okay.
This is David Brooks. Can I just clarify on that? The available, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. The available information from the census that affects the document right now is just the round population number 8,000, and we'll be voting on an update to that at the next meeting. There's some other demographic data in the plan that we'll be able to correct when we get better access to the census data, like the age demographics and the affordable housing information and income, I think, when the census makes its data available to humans who don't have all the right software. So there could be there are other things that can be affected by the 2020 numbers. We'd like to bring them up to date. But that's a detailed answer to the question.
Yeah, I would think if your motion was allowing for any updates based on new 2020 census information, that should allow us the ability to update not just the population, but the demographics, as David said.
I make a motion that we approve the economic development plan with the notion that any demographic data can be updated to reflect the most recent data available. Brett Simus, aye.
Second the motion, Stephen Matillion, aye.
All those in favor? Unanimous action?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Like we've all said, and repeat myself, but that plan's been in the work for about 2 years. And, to call out like Steve Rackerton, who's on this call, who was spearheading that and did a lot of work on it. Donna Deschardins, who's also a founding member of the EDC. Dave Brooks, who you just heard from, who's done a lot. And then Craig Weinfuss, who's also on this call. So we also have Jean Burnett, who did a lot of work in leading us as our former chair, who's still on the committee and Catherine Worsham, and then former members Michelle Antonelli and Bill McCormick. So a lot of people put a lot of time into that. All right, so Madam Chair, the next item I had for more of a discussion from the EDC for an update is the Route 140 TIP project. So as the board is probably aware, the state is proposing to work on Route 140 from William Street down through Brook Street. And what the EDC has discussed and would like the board's help is, if you recall, the Upton Center Business District was the new zoning district we passed for downtown. That runs from roughly, I believe it's the Sanborn House, the house right after MGM Auto, through where Gasco is, in essence, Prospect Street. So the state's going to come in and update through the TIP project all of 140 as you're heading towards Milford, all the way up to Brook Street. And then there's going to be about, I think, 4 parcels on either side of 140 in the district that don't get the updated section or all the work that the state is doing. The 2 big things there are the refinishing of the road and, having the road be nice, but also sidewalks. So right now the sidewalks end at Brook Street, and there's no sidewalk from Brook Street to Prospect. What that does, if we could get the TIP project extended, that quarter mile, would bring sidewalks not only to Prospect Street, so it opens up safe travel from anybody on Prospect Street coming down. It gets us a little bit closer to Governor's Landing in terms of sidewalks. And where Gasco is and across the street from Gasco, those are 2 large mixed-use, now zoned mixed-use parcels. And it would be really nice if they had pedestrian access right down into the center of town. So roughly a month ago, the town manager and I met with Rep. Meridian to just see how he felt about this concept, especially now that we have the infrastructure bill passed and the previous American Rescue and Recovery Plan, and there's a lot of funding coming to the state. And there's already a state project in place, so could there just be additional funding tacked on for that quarter mile there? Rep. Meridian stated that he would like there to be a formal request from the town of Upton. So what I'm saying is, I would, on behalf of the EDC, we would appreciate it if the Board of Selectmen would consider sending a letter yet to be drafted. Don't want to put the town manager on the spot, but maybe it's the town manager, stating we would be extremely grateful if the Honorable Rep. Meridian would consider, advocating to have additional funding attached to this project, because not only does it support economic development, it supports pedestrian safety and all these other great things that the town manager could word into the letter to do that. I think potentially along the same lines, I know that the board that's from the EDC side. The EDC would also be interested if the board was able to gain additional funding to help move water and sewer up 140 in support of development projects that are happening. Obviously, digging up 140 before it's refinished, being appreciative. I believe that would be a different funding source from the state, maybe a MassWorks grant or something like that. So I don't know if the board has any questions, would like to understand more about what we're thinking there. Hopefully I explained it well, but in essence, it's extending the current TIP project a quarter mile from Brook Street to Prospect Street.
I just had a question of the town manager. Do you know where we are on the 25% design on the TIP project?
So the DPW director and I have met with the state officials and the engineering firm that they've hired to design the new roadway, and what is currently proposal to design a roundabout in the intersection at Grove and Main. We met with them approximately 5 weeks ago. They had proposed their 25% design. There's a few things that we provided a comment to that they needed to take back to make some minor modifications. At that time, they had suggested that they were hoping that they would hold a public hearing for comment in the community sometime in early fall. So I was thinking either late September or early October. Now, keep in mind that last fall, we had met with the same design team, and they had suggested that they would be holding a public hearing in the spring of 21. So I guess I caution all of my comments with the fact that the state, that we'll be holding to the state as far as their timeline. But I do expect for us to see something publicly within the next 30 to 60 days.
So we would have to get in touch with them or have Rep Meridian get in touch and find out where we are at and whether we could get extra funding if they're too far into the 25% design, right?
Yeah, so I think we certainly would want to get this letter to both Senator Moore and Rep Meridian as quickly as possible so that they can at least introduce the topic to Mass DOT. I've had follow-up conversations with Rep Meridian, and as Mr. Ross pointed out, there are multiple sources of funding that are out there today with the rescue plan, CARES Act money, and other federal transportation dollars. So his suggestion was that we should put in a request as soon as we can, and they will do the best that they can to try to identify a source of funding to help expand this project to beyond what it is today.
Is the board on board with that and willing to put that forward to the state through our representative in the state Senate?
Yeah, I certainly am. I think it's a great idea, a great opportunity, and it makes perfect sense if we can get access for those parcels and hook them into the town center. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me.
That also opens up commercial land, right? Or mixed.
I had mentioned at a previous meeting, anytime we have an opportunity to expand the TIP project, that's a great opportunity for the, certainly the residents and us on our various boards with our roles. Whether they extend it into West Upton further down towards, let's say, the Mill House, towards that way, or on this end of town and they go from Brook Street over towards Prospect Street, that's fine with me. I think the only thing I'd caution is it appears to me with the last TIP project that these are very, very slow moving projects. So yeah, I wouldn't, especially where we've been waiting now at least 3 months past the proposal to get a look at that 25% as built. So I'm not sure that I see this as, we really need to rush on this, but, absolutely I would support it, support drafting the letter. And, Rep Meridian does a great job representing Upton and always looking for extra dollars for us. I just, I don't know what kind of a chance we have of accomplishing it, but it's certainly worth a shot.
Never know unless you ask.
That's true.
Could you go forward with that, Dave? Excuse me, Brett?
Sorry, just one thought on this. I'm sure that we're not the only community. I'm sure Grafton and Northbridge are doing the same thing with Rep Meridian. I'm sure everybody in Senator Moore's district is doing the same thing and saying, hey, you know what, we see this money coming here, some, hot projects, shovel-ready projects. I guess I would say to Derek and as a board, I'm guessing that there may be other opportunities in the town of Upton to apply, or ask for advocacy or support from Rep Meridian and Senator Moore. And so, certainly we're sitting here, this makes a lot of sense, but I wonder in context of other priorities for the town, if there are other areas or other opportunities where we see, hey, you know what, Rep Meridian, if you have, influence and you can build or leverage some relationships to do these 2 or 3 things, what are those 2 or 3 things? I just want to make sure that we're not jumping into this because it makes sense at the expense of some other opportunity that may be equally or more valuable to the town as a whole.
This is a project that's already in the works, though. I mean, if we wait too long and don't request extra funds, then we're stuck at Brook Street and won't be able to go any further. I think
if I could throw in a quick idea along with what is Selectman Simus is mentioning, something that may not be covered under the current tip. Again, I know they're at or around about the 25%, but what is the end of Maple Avenue going to look like? I think that's something also that comes to mind for me. It was actually brought up by one of our residents probably 6 months ago at one of the poll hearings, which is, with increased freight coming in and off the rail, there's increased trucks coming in and off of Maple Avenue. So is the money better spent? As Brett said, now we've got other opportunities. Would the expansion of the TIP project be better spent trying to somehow improve the end of Maple Avenue, that section of the road? Again, I don't know what the state's plans are as far as that West Upton intersection. I don't know if they're going to widen it to some extent. I would assume we would have a transition lane to make the left-hand turn onto Hartford Avenue, but will there be a right-hand lane to merge onto Maple Avenue? That's a pretty heavily traveled road. So again, I don't know if that makes sense as well, to see if, we could coerce the state to spend some dollars on the first half of Maple Avenue, try to kind of correct some of the deficiencies in that intersection. So that may be something that may make sense as well.
But then we start interfering with the railroad there. And I thought down the street there was some issues with wetlands and whether to widen on one side and not the other. And that, what was the cost of that? Derek, do you remember?
Well, the cost that we asked Dennis Westgate to quote was the corner of Maple Ave and Pleasant down by the schools. And,
right.
And then to go from there all the way up to Hartford Ave to install sidewalks, more or less. And I believe the quote was approximately $700,000 to just do sidewalk installation all the way up Maple Ave. I think what Selectman Latanya is referring to is if we just focus on the section up by the set of lights, given the fact that there's going to be increased traffic because of the railroad expansion, what would that look like? So I think that's something that we would have to ask Dennis to take a look at with his engineering team to see if we can get a cost associated with that, so that if the board wanted to, we could put in a formal request, outline what the thought is and how it would improve transportation access throughout the town, and then go ahead and seek funds. But since I do have the floor, I just want to make mention that we already have put in requests to use state dollars to remove the many miles of AC pipe from our water distribution system, which is already a shovel-ready project. And then we have a second request into the state to expand water and sewer from the brook in the town center going all the way up to the Governor's Landing access point. So the request to expand the tip to Prospect, and then any Maple Ave project. The Maple Ave project would be a fourth project that we could submit to the state. And like I had mentioned in the past, I had met with Rep. Marine a couple of weeks ago, and he said there's just so many sources of funding. He's welcoming all types of requests, and he'll do his best to try to advocate for any and all of the above on behalf of the town.
And let's send that letter, in my opinion.
Yes. I'd like to think that, as the town manager just said, those two projects, the piping and the water and sewer, and correct me if I'm wrong, Derek, the money is being directed to Upton, and Upton will control how it's spent. Whereas the TIP project, the money is spent by Mass DOT. So I'm hoping it's a little bit of a shell game here where Upton benefits from it, but they don't necessarily realize they've given it all to Upton, because they give some to Mass DOT, which was spent in Upton, and then they gave some money to Upton, which Upton spent on it. So fingers crossed, kind of hoping that's what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And, you know, it's very similar to what has transpired in the TIP project already. So, you know, if we go back the better part of 3 years ago, when we heard that the state was planning a roadway reconstruction along Route 140, they did not have an intersection redesign in their original plans. It wasn't until we engaged Rep Meridian and he brought out Barry Lorian, the director of District 3, who him and I and Kelly and Rep Meridian stood on the corner one morning at 7 a.m. and we watched the traffic and the many near misses, that the director realized that they needed to include some type of intersection redesign in order to move traffic in a safe manner. So to your point, Dave, that wasn't a part of their previous design, which it now is. And I think that if we are successful, we could certainly expand this into up to Prospect Street, which would again just redirect state dollars over to our specific project.
I think the only other thing that I would add is, Route 140, as you drive it towards the Milford line, there's a lot of asphalt. It's in very, very rough condition. So I would think, even though this TIP project is designed for this particular section of road, I would imagine it won't be too many years past that they're going to have to repair that other section of road heading into Milford. It's really chewed up badly in a bunch of spots, but that's neither here nor there for this conversation. But just a look ahead topic, I think the rest of 140 is in pretty rough shape as you continue southbound towards Milford, or Hopedale, then Milford.
Maureen, you're on mute.
You're muted?
I'm not now.
Not now.
So we can put that letter together, have Derek get it ready.
If you have something, have it up by the end of the week.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of merge our next two items together. I'll give my little spiel and then we can discuss. So timing of the RFP, reissuance of that, and the future of the Racine building. So I want to start by saying that today's discussion on the future of the Racine building is not around its disposal. What the EDC has looked at is that we at some point need to reissue the RFP for downtown. And we heard from a handful of people that originally pulled the RFP and didn't submit that it was too small of a project. It didn't make sense. And we have a thought process that if the town believes that retaining the Racine building is in its best interest, we will in essence be reissuing the current RFP. And we can make some tweaks, and CARP Strategies, the team working on that grant we have, is going to help us be able to market it better. But most likely we're going to end up pretty close to what we had before, which is no responses, or maybe we'll get one. However, if we're able to expand the RFP to include the Racine building and 6 Main Street, which was the old post office PBX building that has been torn down, along with the church and the parking lots, it makes it a much bigger project. And let me say, we can put in that RFP rules around what we want done with those parcels. Now, it may mean that somebody won't apply because they want to just come in and tear everything down and build from scratch. Or they may say, no, that's fine. I specialize in historic renovations and I will maintain the building or the outside of it or do X, Y, and Z with it. So just including the Racine parcel does not from the get-go mean that building is disappearing. We still have to have that conversation to figure out that. But this is what the EDC is currently thinking from a timing perspective. And we come to the board because we serve at your discretion and we look for your direction on this. That in November, at the November town meeting, the EDC would like to place an article on the warrant. And I'm taking some feedback that I received, or our committee received from Selectman Matillion last year, where he felt like the Thompson parking lot came out of the blue, out of the woodwork. So I'm addressing this now before we put it on, so we have time to discuss it. And if the board thinks it's wrong, we won't even put it on. That the EDC would like to ask for some money, amount to be determined. I'm going to say $25,000 now for the placeholder. Paul's already done a little bit of research to determine it, where we conduct a full study on Racine to determine what it would cost to bring that building up to code and to house 3 levels of offices, museum, whatever it may be. So it's ADA compliant. We've updated electrical, we fix the roof, we do plumbing, whatever needs to be done, structurally, everything to do that. So what we're looking for is to get a study report on all of the building structure and systems, so that then in May, we can go to May town meeting with the question being, do we want to give the board authorization to sell, lease, or transfer the building? Or do we want to hold on to it? But residents of Upton, if you hold on to it, you're kind of signing up for $3 million, $4 million, $8 million. I don't know what the number is. But instead of going to the town and saying, we think you should do this, and people saying, well, we should hold on to it, it's a wonderful building, it's 170 years old, we need to be able also to provide to them, well, to maintain the building and keep it up to speed and whatnot, this is what it's going to cost. And instead of us going, 3 million sounds good, or you know what, I got a guy, he can do it for 250. Like, let's make an investment into our buildings. They're our largest asset in town, and be able to say, this is how much it's going to cost if we want to retain ownership of the building. So in order to do that study, we need some money, which would be a warrant article in November. So that's part of this discussion. If the board thinks that's a worthwhile approach to take, the EDC will sponsor that article. We'll make the case for it on town meeting floor, but we don't want to stand up and do it if the board's against it. We want to be, in line with the board. We would then go in May to potentially look to either dispose of the building, whether it's we're just done with it, or if somebody is going to be allowed to lease it from the town, which means they can't tear it down, but they can modify it and whatnot, and get that approval. While we're working towards that, we will work on updating the RFP. So that the theory is I don't have the date in front of me, I'm sure Derek, Kelly, Sandy could provide it. If it's May 15th is town meeting, we could in theory release the RFP on May 20th because it will have already been written and ready to go. We don't think we can release an RFP that says, hey, bid on this project, and we may get you permission to have this building, we may not. People aren't going to invest dozens, if not hundreds of hours developing a plan and a response to something that may or may not happen. They're going to want to know that the board, the town, has the ability to include those parcels or not. So we believe the timing in the RFP is a release in May to early June. And about this time next year, we have respondents in and we're making a decision. And that RFP will include Racine in some form. Either a complete disposal of the building, the town's done with it, the new person can do whatever they want, or there will be caveats around it. We may still be disposing of the building, but it has to be saved, or X, Y, and Z has to happen. And to one of the questions that Ms. Arnold pointed out or comments earlier, the new community center building does have a space designed in the interior. You won't be able to see it from the exterior, but in the interior for the window. So if the building was going to be lost, Mr. Chairman Brochu planned for that in his building. I don't want to, I say I don't want to do it, but he's here. Steve Rackinson's here. From that building committee, he could answer any questions about that people have. Obviously, it's still in planning, but there is a space made for that window that if it needs to remain property of Upton, it is that. Or, as Ms. Arnold pointed out, maybe there's the ability, if there's a new building built, to include it in there the way the clock is included in the other church. So this is high level. This is what the committee's discussed. We are not wed to this idea, but this is kind of our presentation. And then to add one other little piece to that, who should be deciding the future of the Ristine building? Because really, the EDC doesn't think that that's under our purview for that town asset. Now, if the board wants to say you guys are in charge of it, and we would run somewhat like of a visioning exercise again to determine it, that's fine. But at the moment, we don't think it falls under our purview as the EDC, Economic Development Committee, to decide the future of a 170-year-old building in the center of town. I don't know. I know we love to form committees in town, but we have the same people serving on them. If that's another committee, a feasibility study committee, if it falls under historic, if it falls under EDC, if it's the board directly, whatnot. So it's kind of a couple of ideas put out there for discussion, but the EDC comes to the board tonight looking for some direction on which path to proceed down. The only other thing I'd point out is we do have to put, if we want to do something for November, next Friday is the deadline to put it on. As you know, we can always pull it off. So if we're still not sure, the EDC, we're meeting on Wednesday, will draft an article and put something on, and we can continue this discussion over the next 10 weeks. And if we decide to not go this path, we can pull it off. But as you know, we can't really add it on later in October.
I would be inclined to go to put an article on the warrant and do what Dave has just explained to us regarding hiring someone to see what it would cost the town to rehabilitate the building, or to see if it isn't worth rehabilitating, or lease it, or whatever, or tear it down. I don't know how the other two members feel.
I certainly am a fan of making sort of data-informed decisions. Before we jump into anything, I'm also a numbers guy, and I like to see sort of the data and the information associated with these buildings and what it would take to, restore them, sell them, use them as they are, et cetera. So I think that, I think we're going to go a long way to helping ourselves at town meeting to give residents the clarity they're going to expect and want and deserve to make a decision about something as important as this. I think the more information and the more facts we can share and provide, the better they'll be able to make a decision and feel good about the decision they're making.
Steve?
Might be able to guess, but I would be the contrarian there. I look at this kind of whole, not so much that, the dollars and cents to save the building. I think there's a lot there. I look at a total overview. So you take a town like Upton. I feel like Upton's a very wealthy town in the fact that we have a 2,400 acre state forest in it. We have hundreds and hundreds of acres of open space that we have. We just spent, obviously $12 million build out on a COA and a library, renovated our town hall. We have very, very little. It's almost alarming how little historical preservation we have in this town. The town of Upton owns 3 buildings, yeah, that are, of historical significance: the town hall, the Ristine building, and the Holy Angels Church. So, my point of view is, I think that we would be very foolish, and I think the Board of Selectmen, this is where you kind of, I look at it as I've got to demonstrate leadership. Leadership is, you've got to save that building. The building looks much better just in the fact that we demolished, I think it was number 6 Main Street. And then going, let's just look at it down the road a little bit. We know I think there's going to be a little bit of a parking issue with all the busy activities that we have downtown, the construction of a new building downtown and whatnot. But also from a financial planning aspect, let's look at one other thing. We're probably in year 12 of our payoff of the town hall bond debt. We're paying that with historic preservation dollars. What are we going to do with those historic preservation dollars when the town hall is paid off? We really don't have, again, there's nothing else historic that we have. So you either have to reappropriate, re-engineer, if you will, what you do with your, those historic preservation dollars. Maybe you don't collect them. Maybe you allocate them to open space, or I'm not sure what the availability is for that particular fund. But I look at it as, if you look down the road those number of years, let's face it, we know it's going to be $3 to $5 million. And I wouldn't look at the building and say we need all 3 floors, but I think we certainly would want to make sure that certainly it's ADA compliant, accessible. We definitely want to be able to service 2 of the floors. And I think we've got to expect, 5 to 10 years down the road that's going to be a $3 to $5 million project. But I don't think people, I wince when you ask for $25,000. I think that's a lot of money. But people don't seem to wince at a $12 million build and another $560,000 to, rebuild the playground that's well utilized now. So people didn't seem to worry about that. So I look at it and say, why would people want to get rid of that parcel? It doesn't make any sense. What's the upside?
That's not what we're saying, or what Dave was saying. It's the 25,000 is to determine, if you're going to rehabilitate it 100% and not piecemeal it. And 3 to 5 years down the road, how much more will it deteriorate? I think just the article itself is only giving the town the option to rehabilitate that building 100%, or say to sell it, or to tear it down. That's all that article does.
I think, is my opinion, as far as November, we're putting the buggy in front of the horse. We don't even have a contract or any ideology or any idea really, other than a rough timeline of when that building will be put out of service.
And I don't just, and maybe we're talking about 2 different things. Maureen, I don't think the article would be to knock the building down, to renovate it, or to sell it. I think the article is just to ask for $25,000 to do a study.
Right, but a study that would eventually tell us what would be the best prospect for that building. I mean, whether it would be to rehabilitate it, if it's not too much money to rehabilitate.
I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I mean, the 25,000 leads into what you're going to do with the building, because that's supposedly what we're supposed to come out with.
Yeah. And just Steve, help me understand, because I'm kind of tracking with you here. Is really your point, I think, is why do we need to spend the $25,000? Let's just hang on to it for a while, and in several years we may say, you know what, now's the time we need the extra office space. We need to expand. We've got this historic building, and then sort of when that time comes, do the investigation. Spend the money to figure out, all right, is this $1 million? Is it $4 million? Whatever the number is, but that we don't need to do that now, because your thought is that, we wouldn't make any of those major investments anytime soon. But if we know we want to keep the building, there's no sense in sort of spending that $25,000 now. Is that about what you're saying?
Yes. For instance, there's already been a significant amount of money spent on that building to determine what it would cost to renovate it when this is, again, probably 5 or 6 years ago, when the Library Commission had a study done. So there's already been a study done on the building.
Yeah.
But those documents time out.
Sure.
So you can't take a document that that's 3 years old or 5 years old and say, okay, well now, it's going to be, $3 million. Or I think it was, let's just say hypothetically, if I remember the figures, maybe $500,000 to renovate the ground floor of the building, and something like, say, $2.5 million to do the entire building. But again, those numbers might be 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah.
So I don't think you spend that money until you're ready to make that decision.
Yeah.
Then I don't think it makes.
In the meantime, how much more does that building deteriorate? Now you're putting it out several more years.
Well, we're using it every day.
You may use it every day, but what's it cost the town to heat it, to run the electricity, the water, the sewer, and the basement there has to be fixed?
Yeah. So I
used to deteriorate. I'm all for looking now and seeing what we can do with the building. If we can rehabilitate that building, it is a nice building.
Yeah. I mean, I know I personally, and I think we as a board have talked to or heard from the Historic Commission, that the building has deviated significantly from what its original architecture and design was, so that it is of less historical value than might otherwise have been if it was less disturbed or sort of changed. At the same time, like, again, this is just me being nostalgic, and to Steve's point about we've got limited historical buildings in the town, at least from a aesthetic perspective and in the town center, like, right, as opposed to just looking at it the way it is now, think about what it would look like if we actually did restore it to what the original design and aesthetic of that building was. We don't have to do anything with the inside, right? We can sort of modernize the inside, but spending the extra money to make the outside look the way the original Methodist Church did, that could be a very nice piece of, town property that we have for office space, for downtown offices, or, whatever other myriad options we might have. So, I frankly am sort of leaning both ways on this. And Steve, I think you sort of convinced me a bit to at least take another thought about it. So I'm wondering if, because this is the first, at least I'm hearing about the whole plan for the November town meeting, et cetera. I think it's great, Dave, that you guys have outlined this. Because of the warrant being open and closing and all those dates, I wonder if we put something in, Steve, as a placeholder, but knowing that, I'm not even sure I would support it until we sort of have the information of, what are the old estimates? What are we looking for from a new estimate that we didn't get in the old estimates? And what exactly do we want to spend? If we're going to spend money to have some sort of formal assessment done, what exactly do we want them to look at? Is it restoration? Is it renovation? Is it just taking it back to sort of basic functionality or what have you? So if we could put a placeholder on the warrant and then sort of explore this more deeply, that maybe is a fair compromise while we get more information. I don't know. That's just a thought.
Do we still have the report from 7 or 8 years ago?
Yes.
We do.
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe the numbers Selectman Matillion was quoting are accurate. It was around 3 million, 3.5 million for a full upgrade to the building.
Upgrade.
Probably, yeah, it's probably now closer to what, 4.5 to 5, if it was the same things that we were doing. But those numbers were based on a library being located in the building. And I don't know if it changes, in terms of weight loads and stuff, if there's not a library in there. But, I would say, and I'm fine if
it probably doesn't include the historic, right? The historic restoration and all of that. And I think that sort of makes me tie back to Steve, to your point, like, hey, if in 10 to 12 years, when we're done paying off the town hall, we say, hey, you know what? Now we're gonna maybe we've renovated the inside of the Racine building, but then in 10 or 12 years, we say, all right, you know what, now we're going to use CPC money to restore the outside or something like that. So I didn't mean to cut you off, Dave, but I'm just sort of, thinking as we go here.
So, and just so everybody understands personally, like I'm a huge buff of history and love local history. So I'm not a like come in, bulldoze the town center. He's not originally from here. He doesn't care. Like I love the history. So if we can save things, I'm all for it. But at the same time, wearing my economic development hat, I want to try to, balance that. And what I'm hearing here, and I think that if we're unsure of it as a group here, there's no way we're going to convince the residents at town meeting, even in May, right? Never mind October. One of the concerns that we have on the EDC, and maybe it's more me, I'm trying to remember, we discussed this at the EDC, is you look at Holy Angels, and right, we recently had some water infiltration in one of the recent storms there, and that building was bought. Nobody on the board currently was on the board at the time, because we had to control the town center development, but there's no plan, and I worry about what's going to happen to Racine over the next couple of years. And I hear what you're saying, Selectman Matillion, Selectman Simus, that, there's an opportunity here and whatnot. Do we need, instead of potentially doing this audit on what does the building need, do we need to kind of figure out a vision for this building? And it doesn't have to be on April 1st, 2028, this department moves in or something like that. But what can this building become? Is it additional offices? Is there retail space on the first floor for local businesses in town? Is there the equivalent of a WeWork for people that work from home and need a conference room for the day? Like, what could this building be in that? So 3 years from now, we're not sitting on this call or actually hopefully in person, kind of having the same conversation. But as Selectman Dwinell said, the building's deteriorated in another 3 years. I feel like it's very easy to say we should hold the building for future use. But I question you, the board, from a leadership standpoint, what is the future use? Help direct us in figuring that out and putting a plan into place. And I don't know if the EDC should do that, or if it's like I said, a Racine Visioning Committee, Racine 2030 committee or something like that does that research, that finds out like what can this building be used for. Does the museum stay there, or does the museum move to town hall or to where the COA is vacating, or do we build out the cable studio more, and do we have funds to do that? Like, what is the future of this building? What are the possibilities? Because I personally am going to struggle voting for $5 million to renovate a building because we should just keep it, right? Like, we're going to need that plan. We're going to need to make that case that this is why we need this building. This is why we need to spend that money, whether it's CPC money or direct tax money. It's still out of my pocket. So if you don't want to spend the 25 on doing the structural analysis, maybe we spent 25 on Dotson and Flinker doing the town visioning, and maybe it's not 25, maybe it's 10. And I threw out the number 25. Paul had gotten a quote for something closer to 10 for a study on the building. So we still need to fine tune that. But maybe that's what we need. As Selectman Matillion was saying, we're putting the cart before the horse. Well, maybe we need to figure out what's the future of this building once the library moves out. What can we potentially be doing with it? Who's going to control it? Who's going to be the main tenant? Or is there going to be a whole bunch of tenants?
I think a good first step, my opinion, would be just have a joint meeting, kind of a workshop, a joint meeting between EDC, BOS. No particular. Again, I think we've got time. I don't think there's any particular rush. That could be in October, November. It doesn't matter. But let's get some ideas out there. Yeah, you bring up a good point. The UTV television, cable expansion. Who's in that building now? We know that there's a need for the museum. We know there's a need for space there. let's brainstorm a little bit amongst ourselves and see what that is. I mean, I think to myself, just talking to older residents, guys I've known for, my whole life, they said to me when they were kids, there were 2 or 3 different places in town where they could go as kids to bowl. There were actually bowling alleys in town. So what do we have for activities for kids? We've got a new building that's going to be built, but what is there for really activities? A kid leaves school, kid comes home, does some, a child, I should say, does some studying, and we're going to bring him to the Council of Aging and Library. That's really passive, quiet, more of that quiet time. Where does a young kid go to really let their hair down? Is that a space that we could have ping pong tables, pool tables, something simple, not open all the time, but maybe the RecCom could do something, for the winter months. I look at it as it's space that we could do something, something along those lines, as well as house the Upton Historical Museum. I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and I think that, I don't like to see government always growing by any stretch of the imagination, but there's certainly, look at how busy town hall is. So will we be?
In order to do that, Steve, I would think you'd want to know if it was structurally sound, which this article would take care of through a structural analysis. How are you going to put everything in there not knowing if the building is structural?
I want to start with what I know. I know there's already been an analysis done. I probably have a copy of it. I literally have probably 3 file cabinets full of papers. I probably have a copy of it somewhere. I want to start with what I know.
Well, let's start with that.
Let's start with that. Let's take a look at what we know. Let's take a look at what was studied and what was engineered 7 years ago. And again, the building's used all the time. Every building's going to deteriorate. We just put roofs on the police and fire, and those roofs are starting to deteriorate. So no matter what building you have, they're always going to deteriorate. It's no different than a car. So I don't look at the building and say, well, it's going to be in tremendously worse shape in 3 years. Well, my house may be as well. So we don't know that.
It is if you don't maintain it.
Well, we're going to maintain it while we're in there anyways, right?
That's right.
So, I think maybe if we could all get a look at that, again, I think I have a copy of it, but if we could get a look at that previous study that was done or previous architectural plan that was done and have a joint meeting, and let's do a little brainstorming and come to a little better consensus.
Would you be willing to put a placeholder on?
Again, I feel like it's the buggy before the horse. Myself. We could do a structural analysis just like we did at Holy Angels as a board.
Yeah, I'm fine with putting the placeholder on. I'm on the fence about whether or not I would vote to put it on the warrant. So I guess I would say it that way, right? Because I don't want to hamstring us because we're opening or closing the warrant or what have you. So I don't know enough to make a final decision on this right now, but I'm fine to put a placeholder on the warrant. And then, Steve and you and Maureen and I and whomever we need to meet with or can talk to, Dave and the EDC or Historic Commissioner, it just buys us some time to formulate at least for me, formulate some more clarity about what the options are, because it also has implications on the overall RFP, right? So if we do nothing with Rustine and that by definition means that we're not going to do anything with Holy Angels or the arcade across the street for 10 years, then that's not so great. But if it doesn't mean that, if we still have a viable RFP and project for Holy Angels and across the street, then I'd be much more inclined to say, all right, well, let's hold Rustine off to the side and we can figure out a plan for that, but let's move forward with some other aspect of the downtown revitalization. So I just need to get my head around that. But for now, I'm fine with putting a placeholder on.
I would like to put a placeholder on, but I'd like to see the copy of the report that was done before and maybe have a workshop with the EDC, the historical people, or Board of Selectmen, and come to a consensus of whether we should do the analysis or not do the analysis.
Yeah.
That works.
Okay. So I make a motion that, do we need a motion to put a
Could I ask a
placeholder on?
question? Is this the place for me to continue my remarks, or will there be an opportunity on the next article? Are we discussing both together?
Yes.
May I make my remarks now then?
Yes.
For the motion? Thank you. Just to continue, I think you heard part of what I had to say about Milton Ristine in terms of the window. And I'm appalled. I learned that the idea of placing that round window, the rose window, inside the library and supposedly an acoustical wall, which I don't think a window is part of an acoustical wall, but it does not leave it open to the public. And the pride that I've felt the last few years in Upton, and when I moved to Upton in 1973, the town was just preparing to move into the Milton Ristine building. And that round window impressed me so much, and it impressed me even more when I found out my neighbor, Carl Paulson, was the designer and the man that created the window. But it was blown, the original window there was blown out in the hurricanes in 1950s, and then in the 1960s, the church had it replaced. And I was privileged to sit with Carl once and to hear about the design and how he made it so that the strength, the old window blew out because it was a daisy and all the strength was in the center and how it went. And he designed this window so that it would withstand that type of pressure, because if you'll notice, the window is done in sections. But I have pride in Upton because when I came to town, I was so impressed with that window. It's a landmark. When I ask people, when people ask directions, that's how I give them directions. Well, do you know where the town hall is? Well, do you know where the window? Yeah, I know where the window is. And to have that window there and to be displayed the kind of artwork that a man from our own town produced is a sense of pride. The other sense of pride I have is what you've been discussing about the town hall. I've had historical people from all over Massachusetts who were able to visit the town hall, were quite impressed. And it's a building that we should be very proud of. To do something like that with Milton Ristine, I have mixed feelings. Granted, it is no longer historic in the terms of Mass Historical Commission because of the fact it was changed in the 1970s. I get that, 1960s. And so I think that Tom's point to the land is a critical part of your downtown area, your civic area, and the possibility that the town hall, you will need more space, your cable, the historic. I understand that Historical Commission and the Veterans Board or whatever, and one more committee actually have to share an office. So downtown, you may need that space. Whether your decision after reviewing the documents you're talking about and your placeholder, whether your decision is, okay, do we ask the town to go forward? Do we ask the town to someday consider, instead of renovating that building, tearing it down and rebuilding on that spot, you could make it historic as Selectman Simus had suggested, whichever is more cost effective. But that window needs to remain where it is, visible to the public. It's a sense of pride for Upton. Now, I would want to touch quickly on the Historical Society too, because in the visioning process, and I'm quoting some publicity that was sent from the chairman of the EDC on April 19, 2021, promoting the reason why we had to go forward with the Library Senior Center combination. And in that, he pointed to two places in the vision where it said municipal buildings like the Library Community Center and or the Historical Society Museum are a linchpin for Upton Center. So, at that point, there was quite a bit of discussion about how important the museum is to be located in the downtown area. So whatever the board decides tonight, I am in favor of having some sort, whether Mr. Ross's suggestion was made to put money into, instead of putting it into getting facts and figures right now, to put it into a visioning for what could that building be? What do the town people think? And I think that's not a bad idea either way, however you go, I'm okay with it. But just consider, you can only tear it down once. Now, to get to the neglect of the building, I volunteered thousands of hours in that building over there since about 1998. And I have watched it be a demolition by neglect. And, you know, I've watched the siding. The town manager will let you know that I've actually reported to him the condition of the siding, and other people are very upset about the mold you see as you walk into the building. Some of that can be corrected quite easily because they've got the gardens there that were built, the brick work that built right against the buildings, and the soil just brings the mold right up on the building. And then the answer was, well, we can't clean the building because a pressure washer would destroy the siding. Well, I've talked to more than one person, including myself. If you tear out those brick things, I'm going to go down there with a bucket and clean it myself. And I know other people that would help me. I mean, we don't have to pressure wash the whole building, but I think whatever you decide, if you decide that you're going to keep that building going forward, it has to be maintained to some level. Some people call it mothballing. I wouldn't call it mothballing because you're going to have things active there. But it needs a minimum of maintenance. And for the last 20 years, it's been demolition by neglect. And on the same hand, in Holy Angels, I reported for the past 3 years that if you look at the building from the pizza parlor and you look across the street, the window, which is a very valuable stained glass window on the right, the protective covering is missing. It's gone. On the left, it's there. Now, whatever happens to that building, whether the town does something with it or whether a contractor does something with it, there's value in those windows, and that should be protected. I think it's a very minimal expense because someday the town may say, well, we're going to sell the windows, or the contractor might say, well, I could sell the windows. If they're destroyed, you can't do it. Back to the window again, the rose window, I would feel horrible to see it leave Upton Center. And in some way, whatever happens, whether it's the town preserving it or whether it goes into an RFP that a developer has to preserve it, that the town would own it, we would do maintenance, whatever, just as we do with the town clock. I'd like to see something like that in an RFP. And I want to thank you all for your consideration and your appreciation of the older buildings in town. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Any others, questions, comments?
I'd like to just summarize what I've heard. So everybody understands there will be no RFP issued in calendar year 2021, and it may be middle of 22 as we continue to work through what may or may not be included in there. 2021 in part because we have to get the information from CARP Strategies through that grant program to help us make some changes, and then, you know, obviously figure out if we're including Ristine or not. So I just want everybody on the same page so they understand that's kind of that update. Second, the EDC, unless Chairman Dwinell feels differently, the EDC will put a placeholder article on November, and we can pull that as conversations happen. And then it sounded like third, the board will be calling some type of joint workshop meeting in the coming weeks with the EDC, the board, maybe historic, whoever the board feels comfortable to at least start that conversation for Ristine.
I agree with all the points you've made, Dave.
Okay.
And I do still agree as one selectman to put a placeholder in, and I would like us to get the report that was done 7 or 8 years ago. If it's you, Steve, or if it's somebody on the historical, the library commission, and we'll go from there with our workshop. Put a plan forward, one way or the other.
And then just a quick question. As far as the RFP that you do want to release in 2022, let's say that, talk about the timeline just for a minute. Again, let's assume that the Ristine build is not included in that. When did you want to start the process for that? In other words, what is that beginning date, end date?
So if it was going to be the same parcels that we did last time, which are those 4 parcels, and I think that maybe we need another workshop, Madam Chair, to talk about the gravel parking lot we acquired and whether or not we think that should become a town-owned parking lot that we allow everybody to benefit from. There's obviously cost associated with that, but it creates true like usability and access for everybody if it's a town-owned lot. We haven't narrowed that down yet. I think we could look to release it early in the spring of 22 and try to get it out, you know, in theory as the snow's melting, so that there's a potential, if we do get a successful respondent, we would allow 60 days because it's going to be a complex RFP response, 60-day window, at which point we would then go through the criteria. And it would be next summer, we would be coming to the board with our proposed successful respondent. Obviously, whoever the EDC puts forward, we can't enter into contract, so we would bring into the board of selectmen. So I think if it's those parcels that we've historically talked about, Selectman Matillion, we could be looking at the board negotiating and signing on with the developer at this time next year. I think that's a reasonable assumption.
Okay.
Okay, very good, thanks.
So we all set with questions, comments? All righty. Thank you very much, Dave. And
yes, thank you.
For all their hard work.
Thanks for allowing us to take so much time tonight.
Okay. We have board discussion items up, and it's a motion to accept donation from David Joseph Hardscapes and Construction LLC. Has everybody had a chance to look at that?
I have, yes, I've seen it.
Yes, I'll make a motion to accept the donation in kind of $2,800 from David Joseph Hardscapes. Brett Simus, aye.
Second the motion, Stephen Matillion, aye.
Unanimous action by the board. Uh-oh, lost that. What do we got up here now? I've lost it. There we go.
Men's Club is up next.
Yeah, men's club request.
Oh, discuss men's club request to relocate plantings on town property. Is anybody here from the men's club?
Yep, sorry I had to unmute myself there. Thanks for having me. My name is Mike Howell. I'm with the Upper Men's Club. And with the recent construction activity going on down at 140 and High Street, we anticipate that, you know, those plants were going to get pushed out of the way. So within the club, we were kind of hoping to get town approval to move to the Grove Street and Mendon Road. There's a very large, almost triangular shaped island right there. And the plan would be to, in the center, we have 3 pots right now, and we'd like to propose putting a round island almost equal or similar to the shape that the island's at right now, but just think of it as round right now. We'd put down like 10 yards of compost loam and spread that around, and so it wouldn't be as high or alter the sight line or anything like that. We're kind of familiar with the intentions of not blocking sight lines and roads, and so it'll be clear accessible. With that being said, then we'd take some of the plants from the High Street 140, move them over there, but we also had a plant list in which we wanted to, you know, put tulips and kind of dress it up. I think we wanted to learn a little bit from our past and be able to follow through the colors for the spring, summer, and in the fall. So we've reached out to the DPW, John Johnson. He seems to be in favor of the project. We got a proposal from Plowman's Landscape for roughly $1,000 for all the materials. That included the compost soil, and as I counted it up, 1, 2, 3, 32, 36 plants in total, plus what would be moving over there, and try and savor some of that stuff. And that, along with that project, moving on to a different location because we feel that we're going to have enough plants to move to another location would be to go to the towards the handicap ramp that's been installed for the Kiwanis Beach. The Kiwanis Beach soccer field. And I think if you guys all remember, there's a parking lot that was added, and there's a ramp that goes down to the soccer field. And we just thought it would be nice to dress up that with some of the existing plants that would be left over from the 140 High Street location.
He's very well intentioned, but he's also very good.
Any questions, Brett or Steve?
No, I mean, I think it, oh, go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say I don't have any questions. Seems pretty straightforward. Definitely a worthwhile project. Are you asking for just permission? I think that is one thing I guess I was asking.
Yeah, first we want to get, obviously the town's buying in on it. We don't want to just go around and start doing things without you guys being aware and certainly being involved.
Well, I think we're all in approval, right?
Yeah, no, it sounds great. I think it's a great use of those plants to move them around and not just lose them. And, anything we can do to spruce up the Grove Street, Mendon Street intersection and the ramp down at Kiwanis is great. Looks like Derek has his hand up.
I just have a question from Mike. Mike, we received today a quote from Plowman Excavation for $1,000. Are you seeking funds in addition to the permission to move plants on town property?
Well, if you guys remember correctly, we were in front of you in regards to the plantings and taking care of the flower pots, and we came to an agreement that we had some funds there of up to $2,500. I checked with Sandy, and I believe we still have enough funds to cover it from that account or that stipend.
Mike, do you have, because we haven't paid anything from that original request. Do you have a total cost from that project? I think the original request was for $2,500. I just don't know what the balance is because we never received any invoices to pay for the original request.
Yeah, and I checked with Sandy today. It's my feeling that there's a little mix-up with the way one of the men's club had brought in one of the receipts, and I'm questioning, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Greg Trussell when he delivered the actual mulch to the 2 islands that we currently do. I'm not sure if he ever sent you guys a bill. Because usually he bills you guys directly and I need to touch base with him. But in my Irish rough math brain, we should have enough money to pick up $1,000. And then once we get those receipts straightened out.
Okay. So all they need is our approval, correct, Derek? And
Yeah, they just need permission to do work on town property.
okay. And Steve and Brett, you're good with that?
Yep, I make a motion that we authorize the Upton Men's Club to move some plants on town property from over by 140 and High Street to the triangle at Grove Street and Mendon, as well as the handicap accessibility ramp over by the upper field at Kiwanis. Brett Simus, aye.
Second the motion. Steve Battalion, aye.
Unanimous. Oh, there. Gus. Thank you, Mike. We have a request for a change of business on Class 2 license for 138 Milford Street. Sandy?
Maureen, I think you skipped one. I think we're on the
1-day liquor license.
Yep, Haiti Earthquake Relief Fund.
Okay, motion to approve a 1-day liquor license for St. Gabriel Church. 200. Any questions? Brett, Steve?
No, I reading it over. It looks pretty straightforward. I think, see what the date was, 7 to 9 p.m. The event date is September 8th, 2021.
It looks like Sarah's here. Do we want to let her tell us a little bit about the event?
Sure. Thanks for entertaining us tonight. St. Gabriel is had a 20-year winning relationship with the church in Haiti, and they have been devastated by the recent earthquake. So we're throwing together a fundraising dinner. It's next week. Yeah, I think it is straightforward. It's from 7 to 9. We're hoping to have a cash bar as part of our fundraising efforts.
Okay. You have a motion?
I have no other questions. Brett, if you have no questions, I can make a motion.
Please do.
Okay. I make a motion that we approve the one-day liquor license for Sarah Baldiga for the St. Gabriel Church Haiti Earthquake Relief Fundraiser on September 8th. Stephen Mattelli and I.
I second the motion. Brett Simons, aye.
Unanimous action? We have a motion to,
Very good. Thank you.
Discuss a request for change of business on Class 2 license for 138 Milford Street.
I need to recuse myself. I'll step away. Thank you.
Do we have anybody here from 138? You're muted.
That better?
That's better.
All right.
But do you have any information on this? A Class 2 license change of business?
It's
What
just the business name. You guys approved our license for, it's my wife and I, Rose and Tim Cornu, for a dealer's license at 138 Milford Street. The name that was originally up was Wayland Foreign Motors. And since we don't want to run Wayland Foreign Motors in Upton, we've got, another name for the business at the same address. So that's basically it.
Brett, Steve, any questions? You're muted, Brett.
It's the same entities in the same building that we've owned for 25 some odd years in Upton.
So it's just a name change?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. You there? Steve?
Steve had to recuse himself because it was a Class 2 dealer's license.
I can't hear. Can you hear Brett? Is he on mute? Oh, his microphone is on.
Armin, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
And Mr. Corno can. Sandy?
I cannot hear Brett, but I can hear everyone else.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys still can't hear me?
Oh,
now we can.
All right. Sorry about that. I was just asking what the new name of the business is so I can make a motion.
It's R&T South Coast Sales LLC.
Okay. So I make a motion to change the business name to R&T South Coast Sales LLC.
That's it.
At 138 Milford Street. Brett Simons, aye.
I'll second that. Maureen Dwinell, aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have the motion to appoint the Technology Committee to act as the town's cable advisory committee. Is Steve back? Yep.
Yes, I am here, Maureen. Thank you.
I can speak to this if you don't mind.
No.
Steve Rackerton, I thought, was on the meeting. Steve Rackerton is the chair of the Technology Committee. He submitted this request on behalf of the Technology Committee. It's their hope that the board would appoint the Technology Committee, giving them the authorization and the authority to act on behalf of what would have been the responsibility of the Cable Advisory Committee. Right now, the Cable Advisory Committee, there is only one member remaining. I believe he has since resigned. We are hoping to enter into contract negotiations for a 10-year contract with Spectrum Charter within the next 3 to 6 months. And it's required by law that there is a committee, typically the Cable Advisory Committee, that will take the lead and coordinate local efforts for those negotiations on behalf of the town. Given the fact that we don't have a Cable Advisory Committee, the Technology Committee is willing to take on a leadership role and start the negotiation process with Spectrum and with Town Council. So they're just seeking authorization by the Board of Selectmen to have that authority transferred over to them so that they can start negotiations.
Any questions?
Is the plan to dissolve the Cable Advisory Committee?
I mean, that certainly would be the Board of Selectmen's decision, and I don't think that they're looking to dissolve it. There's just the Cable Advisory Committee has really not met in a couple of years now, and again, not having any members. And we went through a process to try to recruit members this past spring, and we didn't get any applicants. But again, the Technology Committee has a number of people who are experienced in this field, and they would be willing to, again, start negotiations on behalf of the town.
Brett?
Sounds good to me.
So could I have a motion to appoint the Technology Committee to act as the town's cable advisory committee?
Yep, I make a motion that we appoint the Technology Committee to act as the town's cable advisory committee. Brett Simons, aye.
Second the motion, Stephen Metellian, aye.
Unanimous action. 5.6, motion to approve the municipal aggregation plan. Is that?
Yeah, no, that's me again. So as you recall, back in March, we had folks from Colonial Power, Denise Allard and Mark Capadona came in. They described how municipal aggregation works. We talked about how the town used to be part of the municipal aggregation program through Colonial Power, but since that has elapsed, we had to go ahead and hold a public comment period for the aggregation plan, which was posted on the town's website, and we only had received one comment, which really didn't have much of a concern with the town's plan. That comment was forwarded to Colonial Power. The next step would be to approve this plan as written and as posted on the town's website. Once complete, we can go ahead and submit our application to the Department of Public Utilities. From there, we'll probably put in a 18-month queue before our aggregation plan is approved. Once it's approved, then we would be allowed to go out to bid and try to seek better electric rates for our residents of the town. after the DPU has given us local approvals. So tonight's request is for the board to approve the town's aggregation plan as posted on the town website.
Derek, is that an opt-in or opt-out?
So once we have the aggregation plan approved, and then we go ahead and sign with a power company for a specific rate, that is an opt-out plan. So every town resident would be automatically included in these lower group rates. If a resident chose that they didn't want to be a part of this plan, they would have to opt out of the plan.
Okay, thank you. Steve, Brett? Nothing?
I'm good.
Okay. Motion to approve the municipal.
I was just going to ask, is there any other questions or I mean, any other changes to that aggregation plan as it was presented to us back in March?
No, there were no changes made at all.
Okay. I'm good. You want to make a motion?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Make a motion to approve the municipal aggregation plan. Stephen Mattelli and I.
That's aye.
Unanimous. 5.7, motion to approve application to the Army Corps of Engineers. Give us a little background on your town.
Yep, I'll give you some background on this. So I have been working with the president of the Mendon Upton Soccer Association. Selectman Simons had referred him over to me. The president is seeking permission to put a porta potty over at the soccer field at West River Street, and then enclose that porta potty with a fence-like enclosure with a gate. And the reason he wants to put a gate or enclosure on it is to prevent it against any vandalism. So in order to do this, I've worked with the DPW and the Conservation Commission. The DPW has identified a location on either side of the parking lot which they feel would be appropriate for this porta potty. And then the Conservation Commission, they don't have any concerns with the location or the existence of this porta potty. However, in order for us to get final approvals, we would have to submit a letter outlining our intention, the construction of the enclosure, and that letter would go to the Army Corps of Engineers. We have a point of contact. His name is Joe Zanka, who's already stated via email that the Army Corps would not have a problem with this approval. So our conservation agent, David Pickard, has drafted a letter on behalf of the town outlining this plan, seeking permission to construct an enclosure around a porta potty with a number of other details. So I'm seeking permission this evening from the Board of Selectmen to go ahead and file an application with the Army Corps of Engineers.
Brett, any questions?
Nope, I'm familiar with this. Sounds like it's a good idea.
Steve?
I don't have any questions. I'm good with it.
I motion to approve then.
Make a motion to approve the application to the Army Corps of Engineers for the construction of an enclosure for the portable bathroom unit at West River Field. Brett Simus, aye.
Second, Stephen Mattelli and I.
Unanimous action. We have a motion to approve the grant, the fire grant. Is the fire chief here?
I am.
Oh, there you are. This is for the $1,500, $1,508.
No, well, I'm not sure what I didn't have that note on me, but no, this is the federal Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program that comes up every year. And we've been successful a few times obtaining grants through the federal government, the FEMA system with the Assistance to Firefighters Grant. This grant was written to finish the vehicle exhaust extraction system within the building of the fire station. When they originally put the building up, they only had enough monies to do the first 6 bays on the front row side of the building on Church Street. So the back 4 bays were never completed. So we do have some apparatus that is, as some know, a little older, and when they do start up, they're diesel engines and produce quite a bit of diesel exhaust, which everybody knows is not something you should be inhaling. So we wrote the grant. We were successful in getting that grant. The grant totaled almost $32,000. So yeah, the town's portion of that will be the 1508.57. That's definitely within our budget to manage and take care of that. So for a cost out of the fire department budget of 1508.57, you're going to finish up the vehicle exhaust extraction system within the building. So, and certainly, as you know, if you read my memo, it's certainly well worth doing with cancer risks and everything else that the firefighters face. Plus, also, we do hold some town meetings at that building and facility, so those diesel exhaust fumes can, permeate throughout the building. So, it's a great opportunity. So, I'm looking for your support to accept the grant and move forward with it.
Thank you, Chief. Could we have a motion to accept the grant?
It's certainly a no-brainer, $1,500 match to a $30,000 grant. So that's very good work. Yes, I'll make a motion. Make a motion to accept the Assistance to Firefighter Grant Award, and that is in the amount of $30,171.43. Stephen Mattelli and I.
Brett Simus, aye.
Unanimous action.
Thank you all. I just wanted to say thank you. This will be my last Selectmen's meeting as I retire this Friday. So I just wanted to thank you all for allowing me to be the fire chief in the town of Upton. It's been a pleasure to serve the community and the firefighters and the public. So you guys have all been great since my time there in Upton for the past 3 years. So I just wanted to say thank you very much.
Thank you for serving.
Thank you for your service.
Great. Yeah, thank you for your service and good luck in your future endeavors.
Thanks.
Just as a reminder, I know Chief doesn't want me to say it, but the fire department and the association putting on a little retirement ceremony this Friday at 12 o'clock. So all is welcome to thank the chief for his 3 strong years of work here in town. And we had a department head meeting this morning. We talked to the chief prior to his departure, and like I said to him this morning, he came at a difficult time in town, and he stabilized the department in many different ways through finances with his great grant work to just managing the annual budget. I know that Kenny Costa, our finance director, certainly appreciated Chief DeFranzo's efforts on that end, and just being kind of a strong leader for the department. And showing a bunch of young, new paramedic firefighters, how to be strong firefighters in this discipline. So we all appreciate his effort and looking forward to what he does in the future. So thanks again, Chief, for everything you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chief.
Town managers report.
Okay, so I got a few things I'd like to talk a little bit about, but I was holding off on this, and I guess I could have brought it up during the EDC discussion, but that was going on very long, so I didn't want to bog down the discussion anymore. But as you know, we had the LSP come before the board. I believe it was last fall. So our LSP is licensed site professional. They're the engineers we hired to manage the Grove Street property. So they've completed all their initial analysis and assessments. They've submitted the initial paperwork to DEP. They will submit the next set of documents outlining the town's closure process. Those documents will be submitted this December. And they're waiting as long as possible to submit those documents, and they're actually due no later than this December. And the reason why they're going to delay the submittal, because once those documents are submitted, the town is on the clock, 3-year clock, to finalize the closure of that property. I think we can all agree that in all likelihood that parcel of land will be a parking lot in some shape or form, whether it's a public parking lot or a private parking lot. But I just want folks to understand that we don't have forever to debate on what we're going to do in the town center, because we are definitely under a 36-month timeline to finalize our closure of that property. And a simple closure could be that, we asphalt the parking lot, we put in a stormwater system, and then it's closed. But we'll have to get that done within that 36-month window. So I just wanted the board to be aware of that. I had a conference call with the LSP this past Friday. As you know, we've had 2 major rainstorms over the past few weeks. And unfortunately, we've had 2 floodings in some of our buildings. So the senior center over at the Millhouse building, there was a drain pipe that actually couldn't handle the water volume and came through the floor of the senior center and flooded, I would say, approximately 30% of our senior center. Janice Nowicki, our director, has been working directly with Millhouse to have that properly cleaned and ventilated. And because it was property of the Millhouse, they've been incurring all the costs. But during that time, we also found that there was a leak in the Holy Angels building as well because of the heavy rain. So Kelly has reached out to Galen Associates, which was the company we hired to do the fire and police roofs. We expect them to do an assessment sometime tomorrow, if not later this week, so we can understand the full extent of the damage from those heavy rains. So we'll keep you posted on that. The hope is that it's just a minor repair that we can hire a group to go up there to fix in short order. I mentioned Chief DeFranzo's retirement previously. Once the chief retires, as you know, we'll be naming Mike Martian as the acting fire chief to provide consistent leadership at the fire department. He will take over the reins effective at 4 p.m. this coming Friday. And then as far as the Westboro Road property, we talked a little bit about putting this property out to potential bid. I'm working directly with G&H on this property to try to, we were originally going to survey the property, and then G&H convinced me that a compilation map would be a product that would be something that we could use in the bid versus having a full survey. So I'm still working with them to getting a product that I think would be useful for developers to review. I'm not satisfied with the initial product, but my hope is that once I have a final product from G&H, I can come back to the board at our September 28th meeting with a draft bid package, and then at that point I'll be seeking a vote from the board to set a minimum bid price for that. So my hope is that by early October we can put the 12 acres of land on Westboro Road out to bid. Again, I'll keep you posted on that. The DPW director reported today that that we tested our public drinking water as of last week for PFAS. We are expecting to get results sometime next week. So as soon as I get those results, I will be reporting that to the Board of Selectmen. Depending on the results, we'll take any necessary action with informing the public if that is necessary. And then the last item I just wanted to remind folks of are 2 things. Is one, the warrant closes next Friday, September 10th. So please, those individuals that are expecting to submit articles. Submit them to me by next Friday. And then Chairman Dwinell has called a joint meeting with the Finance Committee for next Tuesday at 7 p.m. I believe that's going to be in person so that the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee can go ahead and discuss the $600,000 that the town has now saved due to the recertification of the Mendon-Upton Regional School District's budget. So please note that in your calendars. Again, next Tuesday at 7 p.m. at Town Hall, we'll be discussing this with the Finance Committee. Pending any questions, that's all I have for this evening.
Questions, Brett or Steve?
I don't have any.
I'm good. Thank you.
Have you, Brett and Steve, have you had a chance to look at that thumb drive now that you brought up that Westboro Road property, Derek, for the property on North Street? The Forest Heights?
No, I haven't looked at any of it.
I haven't. I knew there was a thumb drive, but I never had privy to it.
So we have a sizable file of the North Street property, which again, that's the 100 acres of land the town now owns. We take it through tax title. So in order for me to order a survey, at our last meeting we discussed, should this be a survey of a typical traditional development, or should this be a survey of an open space development? In order for me to proceed with that survey, I'll just need a little bit of guidance. And if it makes it easier, I can drop off your thumb drive. I only have one that was provided by Mike Penko. He has all the files. So I can drop it off to each one of you, Steve and Brett, and take a look at it. And maybe this could be a future agenda item to make a final determination on how to proceed.
Did you ever download that, Derek? That thumb drive?
Yeah, I downloaded it to the town's file, so I have it on a server now. If you have access to the server, then you certainly... Kelly, does the board have access to the server?
No, they do not. We could maybe work on getting them some access to it, but we might be better off creating a Dropbox and putting it in the Dropbox and giving them access to that.
That would be good if we could do that.
I'm just a little concerned about the number of VPN licenses, Derek, out there.
What do you call it, an airdrop?
It's an application that we can download it to and then send it. The town really does have one. I know we were using one for the visioning project.
Okay. Should you, Brett and Steve, take a look at that when you get it?
Yeah, absolutely. I can stop in and pick up the thumb drive if that's quicker. Whatever works.
Brett?
I'll reach out to the board tomorrow. Let me try to put it on a Dropbox and then send you the link to the Dropbox. You can click on it and go through it at your leisure.
That sounds good. Anything else?
Not here.
Steve?
No, I have nothing else right now.
Take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn. Stephen Mattelli, aye.
Second the motion. Brett Simus, aye.
Unanimous action.
Have a great night, folks.
You too.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Night.